Mom wants us to come home for New Year, my husband said suddenly during our first holiday season as a married couple. I told him I wanted to visit my own family too, but he refused. To make things worse, his mother started criticizing me, saying I wasn't acting like a good wife and calling me a bad daughter-in-law. No matter how much I tried to talk it through, my husband always took his mother's side. I had enough. I couldn't keep playing this family game. I decided to take steps that would end my connection with my in-laws for good. My name is Abby, and I'm 28 years old. I married Malcolm, my boyfriend of 2 years. Our life as newlyweds was going well. We both worked full-time, so we shared the household chores. I didn't want all the housework to fall on me just because I was the woman, so I made sure we split the tasks fairly. I was happy with my job and personal life, and I even started thinking about having a child once things settled down. 1 month after our wedding, my in-laws suddenly invited me to their home. Actually, invited isn't the right word. It felt more like a summons. I'd met them before the wedding, but I'd been too nervous to really talk with them. I thought this could be a good chance to connect with my mother-in-law, so I went there with a positive attitude. However, when we arrived, things quickly turned sour. As soon as my husband and I sat down in the living room, my mother-in-law called out, "Abby, why are you sitting so comfortably? Make me some tea." I was taken aback and apologized, a bit flustered. I thought they'd treat me as a guest at their house. I didn't expect anything fancy, but I also didn't expect to be treated like a servant. As I made the tea, my mother-in-law kept complaining, "You're taking too long. Abby, don't you know you should warm the cup first?" She sighed constantly, watching every move I made. My father-in-law and my husband stayed silent. I thought to myself, if she has so many complaints, why doesn't she make the tea herself? I admit, I wasn't great at making tea, but it bothered me that she kept imposing her own high standards on me. Then, on another day, I was about to start cleaning our house when my mother-in-law suddenly called, asking us to come over. I hurried to her house with my husband, only to find her already angry. "Why didn't you bring any gifts? Isn't it normal to bring a gift when visiting your in-laws?" She scolded. She scolded me without any warning. "I didn't plan to go out today and only decided to come here at the last minute," I explained, but she cut me off. No excuses. These days, daughters-in-law are so quick to disrespect their mothers-in-law. I really ended up with a lousy daughter-in-law. I apologized, feeling trapped. Neither my husband nor my father-in-law said a word to help me. I didn't need them to defend me completely. I just wanted someone to step in and stop her unreasonable rant. After her lecture, I whispered to my husband, "Malcolm, can you say something to your mom?" It was a last-minute visit. There was no way I could have prepared a gift, but he just sighed, sounding annoyed. "Shouldn't you always have some gifts ready, just in case?" I agree with my mom on this. I was shocked and hurt. Is he serious? Why is he siding with his mom? My opinion of him was quickly dropping, and I was growing to resent my mother-in-law even more. After that, she constantly called me over, forcing me to follow their old-fashioned customs. She expected me to do all the chores, prioritize my husband and in-laws, and spend every New Year's holiday at their house. I thought, isn't this thinking too outdated? By our first New Year's holiday after marriage, I was already dreading visiting my husband's family. One day, he told me, "We're expected to go back to my parents' house for New Year's." "What? When do I get to visit my own family?" I asked. He shrugged. "It might be tough this time. We'll decide after New Year's." What? I was angry. "We promised we'd visit both families equally, remember?" He sighed, clearly annoyed. "It can't be helped now, right? Why bring this up again?" Why was he acting like this was no big deal? Before we got married, we had agreed that we would visit both families regularly. We'd even rented an apartment halfway between our parents' homes to make it fair. But now, we'd already visited his family 6 times, and I'd only been able to see my family once. This time, he expected us to stay at his parents' house from the end of the work week until work resumed after the holiday. I couldn't accept such a ridiculous plan. I told him, "At least let me visit my family before work starts again." He replied, "Ask Mom." So, I called my mother-in-law. As soon as she picked up, the first thing she said was, "Abby, you're in charge of making the special New Year's dinner." "Fine, I understand, but I will visit my family before work starts again, so please be prepared for that," I said firmly. My mother-in-law raised her voice in surprise. "What's this about prioritizing your own family? You lack the proper attitude of a daughter-in-law." She lectured me for an hour on the phone, leaving me totally drained. When I complained to my husband, he shrugged. "Mom just wants you to be a good wife. Abby, She always says, I want her to be a wife suitable for our family. His indifference was wearing me out, too. In the end, we spent the entire New Year's holiday at his parents' place. It's your first New Year as a married couple, so focus on his family this time, my own mom had advised, so I reluctantly agreed. But during our stay at my in-laws' house, I felt like a maid. I was responsible for everything, preparing meals, cleaning the house, doing the laundry, taking out the trash. I had to do it all by myself. When I asked my husband for help, I got scolded. Abby, isn't this a wife's job? Malcolm works hard all year, so he deserves to rest during New Year's, right? You're being really inconsiderate, my mother-in-law said. I wanted to shout. I work full-time, too, thanks to you. I haven't rested at all during the holidays, but I kept my thoughts to myself. It was the beginning of the new year and the first year of our marriage, so I forced myself to get through it. After the holiday, I still hadn't seen my family. When I finally planned to visit them, my husband said casually, I'm tired, I'll stay home, leaving me to go see my family alone. That was probably when I started losing trust in him. Of course, I was frustrated with my mother-in-law and my husband's family, but even more than that, I was fed up with my husband for never taking me seriously when I tried to talk about how I felt. Even after New Year's, my mother-in-law didn't stop her harassment. When I began refusing to visit her house, she started calling every day. By the time I'd wake up in the morning, I'd already have 10 missed calls from her. One morning, I saw I had missed calls from my mother-in-law. Thinking something serious had happened, I called her back, only for her to start yelling at me. So you finally woke up. You're not responsible enough as a wife. Get up at 5 a.m. every day and make Malcolm a nutritious meal. Even if I got home late from work, she would scold me, saying, I heard from Malcolm, it's unacceptable for a woman to stay late at work. A wife who doesn't come home before her husband is terrible. Prioritize your home, you selfish girl. I almost told her that I earned more than her son and actually contributed more to our living expenses, but I held it in and just muttered, yeah. Over time, I stopped answering her calls and deleted her voicemails without listening. This went on for about a year. Then the dreaded New Year's season came around again, and my husband started pestering me. Mom says you should come home for the New Year's holiday, he insisted, but this time, I firmly told him, I'm not going this year. I can't take it anymore. I'm not a housekeeper. Annoyed, my husband grumbled, Abby, don't upset my mom. You married me, so at least be considerate of my family. Excuse me? You never even make an effort to visit my family, and I've worked really hard to get along with your mom. That's why she's always mad, he snapped. You need to try harder. I felt my anger rising. Why is he acting like this is all my fault? Then he dropped the final bomb. Mom says you're a failure. That's why she's mad at you. At that moment, the frustration I'd been holding back finally exploded. A failure? I thought. I've put your family first all this time, for your sake, and this is what I get? Taking a deep breath, I looked him in the eye and said, I'm cutting ties with your family. I'm never seeing your mom or dad again. He looked shocked, but then quickly realized arguing would be pointless. Fine, he said, I'll go to their place alone for the holidays. After that, things were a bit tense between us, and we talked less at home, but honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in ages, I was able to spend the New Year's holiday with my own family, and that alone made me incredibly happy. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mom looked concerned. Abby, is everything okay with Malcolm's family? I can't help but worry. I'm fine, Mom. I made it clear I'm not going to be involved with them anymore. Is that so? I hope everything will be all right, she said, still looking a little uneasy. I enjoyed the time at home, leaving the chores to my mom for a change. I was finally relaxing when the doorbell rang. I quickly went to answer it, only to find my husband standing there, looking exhausted. I was shocked to see him. What? I thought you were going to your parents' house today, I said, letting him in. He stood there, saying nothing, until I finally demanded an explanation. Well? He looked at me and finally spoke. Mom said to bring you with me. My mother-in-law's persistence was unbelievable, but I held my ground. Didn't I tell you I'm not going back to your parents' house? When I said I was cutting ties with them, you agreed, didn't you, Malcolm? I reminded him. Yeah, but Mom's really angry. She says it's unthinkable for a daughter-in-law not to visit her in-laws. I don't care, I said firmly. I can't take your mother's harassment anymore, and your dad just ignores it all. I'm done with them. Malcolm looked worried, but that's a problem. Abby, like Mom said, you married into this family, please consider my position. Your position? I snapped. What era are you living in? I didn't get married to be your parents' housekeeper. I'm tired of dealing with in-laws who harass me and a husband who won't stand up for me. I'd never spoken so directly before. He looked startled but still didn't seem to get it. If you keep taking your mother's side, I'll divorce you. Divorce? You're kidding, right? I'm serious. Why should I stay married to a husband who doesn't help me and only does what his mother wants? I'd be much happier on my own. When he saw how serious I was, his face went pale. Just then, his phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, he looked alarmed. It was his mother. He answered in a nervous voice, and I could hear her loud voice even from where I stood. Losing patience, I grabbed the phone from him. Hello, mother-in-law. It's me, Abby. No matter what you say to Malcolm, I'm not coming over anymore. What? You're my daughter-in-law, aren't you? I won't accept that. She shot back, undeterred. Daughter-in-law? What is this? The Stone Age? It's the 21st century, I replied sharply. What an insolent bride. You can at least show up for family events. No way, I said firmly. Malcolm is free to visit as much as he wants, but I won't be coming. Whether it's a special occasion or not, I absolutely won't be going. I told her firmly, if you keep pushing, I'll divorce Malcolm. Divorce? Are you trying to bring shame to him? She snapped. Then fine, I said, let's divorce, and I'll remarry under my own last name. How about that? That's absurd. I won't allow it, she fumed. Do as you please, I replied calmly, but no matter what you say, I have no intention of dealing with you or your family again. Goodbye. With that, I hung up. Then I turned to Malcolm and said, here's the deal. If you take your mother's side, we're done. But if you understand my point of view and treat me as an equal, we can make this work. Malcolm looked down for a long time, thinking. Finally, he said, I understand. I choose you, Abby. Since then, I stopped visiting my in-laws, and my mother-in-law stopped contacting us as well. Malcolm, maybe realizing how he had acted, now regularly visits my parents. And, of course, my parents treat him well and appreciate him like their own son. They certainly don't treat him like a servant. I know we'll face challenges in the future, but with Malcolm choosing to stand by me, I'm hopeful we'll tackle each one together.
Stay away from me with that bedwetting smell, both of you.
Daniel yelled at my daughter Lisa and me. Lisa was scared by a look on Daniel's face I had never seen before. But I didn't understand what Daniel was talking about. Bedwetting? Who is he referring to?
Eh? Whose story are you telling? Don't play dumb. Lisa, you're wetting the bed, aren't you? That ammonia smell is a dead giveaway.
Daniel pointed at Lisa. Lisa was frightened by Daniel's angry face. I answered for her. Lisa hasn't wet the bed. Neither her bed nor her pajamas are wet.
Eh?
Daniel's eyes widened. I thought this might be my chance to get away from Daniel. My name is Nancy, 35 years old. I live with my husband Daniel, who is 3 years older than me, and our 5-year-old daughter, Lisa. Since Lisa was born, I've been working remotely. I love working, so I studied design on my own. Thanks to that, I now have work every day. Daniel doesn't seem to understand my job at all. Remote work can't earn much, can it? Scoffing. I don't like Daniel's attitude, so I don't show him much of my working. Lisa is a very honest and good child. Maybe because she sees me busy with work, she comes to help with the laundry or cooking, cooperating with me. She's like a little manager to me. Though she's only 5, I'm happy she tries to help with the household. I'm really glad she's not like Daniel, who is always sarcastic. Until we got married, I thought Daniel was an attractive man. I'm the type who gets passionate about love, and the moment I met Daniel and fell in love, I decided I had to marry him. I never thought he would change this much after marriage.
Hey, isn't my dinner ready yet? It's already 7 p.m.
One day, When I had just come back from shopping and was thinking of taking a break, Daniel came to me and said roughly. He was in a sloppy appearance, wearing a shirt and underwear, with socks scattered around the entrance. Daniel, a company employee, comes home every day at 6 p.m. I've heard it's a very employee-friendly company with abundant funds and stability. Sorry. The way back was crowded. I'll start making it now, so wait.
What? Wait, you say? I've told you dinner should not be at 7 p.m.
It can't be helped. I had errands. Have you taken care of the laundry? Normally, I ask Daniel. If you come home and have nothing to do, help with the housework. I knew Daniel wouldn't help with the housework, but married friends told me. Education is key for husbands. If you don't give up and keep teaching, housework becomes easier. So, I kept asking Daniel to help with the housework without getting discouraged. Lisa did the laundry.
Lisa did? Then what were you doing?
I didn't need to ask. I could smell beer from Daniel's breath. Realizing the answer, I noticed Daniel's cheeks were red. I wonder if he doesn't feel ashamed that he let Lisa take care of the laundry while he drank alcohol. I'm tired from work. It's terrible you order me to do housework. My colleagues say their wives do all the housework. Compared to them, I'm pitiful. Having a wife who asks me to do housework after work. Daniel always compares himself to others. I've met his colleagues, and indeed their wives are stay-at-home moms. Comparing to other families is just childish. Sighing, I started preparing dinner. Daniel's problem isn't just not helping with the housework.
Lisa, you wanted this, right? Dad worked hard and earned money, so he bought it.
Daniel handed Lisa a doll that's popular among children. The doll, always displayed prominently in toy stores, is somewhat pricey.
A doll! Yay! Dad, thank you.
Lisa jumped on Daniel, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Daniel nodded satisfactorily and lifted Lisa. Lisa was happy, holding the doll. Actually, this happens quite often. Daniel doesn't do any childcare but seems to put all his effort into spoiling Lisa. He buys her things I said no to, thinking it will make her grow fond of him.
Did you buy another toy? I've told you to stop spoiling her.
When I mildly reprimand him, Daniel glares at me. What? It's fine. I bought it with my own money, unlike you. I earn a lot every month. How I spend my money is my business, and Lisa is happy anyway. Lisa is playing with the doll in front of her, not listening to our conversation. Daniel, gaining Lisa's trust, seems not to care about my words at all, looking proud. I worried this would make Lisa grow up spoiled. So, I took the doll from Lisa.
I'll keep this for now. You can have it back on your birthday. Why?
Lisa voiced her discontent at having the doll taken away.
This is something Dad worked hard to buy for you. It's better to receive it on a special day, right?
Okay. Surprisingly, Lisa nodded in agreement. Daniel muttered his dissatisfaction.
What is it?
But I felt relieved inside. It was good that Lisa understood.
In that place, how about we go somewhere fun next Sunday?
When I suggested this to cheer up Lisa, her face lit up.
Yes, I want to go.
Lisa was overjoyed, seemingly forgetting all about the doll.
Hey, that sounds good, right? Let's go to the amusement park this Sunday.
I looked at Daniel, hoping he'd agree to an outing for Lisa's sake, but he scratched his head, looking troubled. I can't that day. I have plans.
Huh? But...
Plans? It was unusual for Daniel, who usually does nothing on Sundays, to have plans. Can't be helped. I've had them for a while. We can go to the amusement park another time. Okay. I was taken aback, and Lisa was disappointed again. I told Lisa. Then, let's you and me go. Okay. She smiled again, happy even if it was just the two of us. Still, I was curious about Daniel's plans. But asking him would probably only yield vague answers. I decided to let it go as long as Lisa was happy. I didn't appreciate Daniel lounging around the house, not doing housework or childcare, but I was thankful he brought home a steady income every month. However, recently something strange has occurred.
What's this about?
At the end of the month, when I go to the bank to calculate next month's household expenses, I couldn't believe my eyes looking at our joint bank account's history. The balance had somehow dropped to $5 this month. I hurriedly checked the dates when the money was withdrawn. Every other day, there were withdrawals of $100 or $200. No wonder the balance was only $5. But who? It's decided. It's Daniel. It had to be Daniel. No one else could have made those withdrawals. As soon as I realized, I felt my head heat up. What on earth did he spend so much money on? I had questions, but no answers came to mind. That night, I waited for Daniel to come home to confront him about the truth, but there was no sign of him even past 6 p.m. It was rare for him to work late. I'm home. How long had I waited? When I heard Daniel's voice from the entrance and checked the time, it was past midnight.
Welcome back. You're late.
Just had some overtime. Daniel, staggering and slurring, clearly drunk, irritated me with his obvious lie about overtime.
You could have told me you'd be late. I made dinner.
Why do I have to report everything? Figure it out. Useless. I'm tired from work. Unlike you, I don't work as a hobby. Even drunk, Daniel didn't forget to be sarcastic. Realizing he truly despised me deep down, I felt sad. Daniel went straight to bed without showering, rolling into his own room to sleep. Just looking at his sloppy figure made me sigh. I was lying in bed, feeling unsettled about the time I spent waiting for Daniel, and eventually fell asleep without coming to terms with it. The next morning, while I was preparing breakfast, Daniel came storming in, making a lot of noise, fresh out of bed. He approached Lisa, who was watching TV, and roughly said,
"Hey! You doodled on the back of this contract, didn't you, Lisa?"
"What?" Daniel held out a piece of paper to Lisa. Indeed, there were traces of Lisa's drawings on it. Since Lisa always draws on the back of used paper, it was clear she had simply drawn something as she usually does.
"This is an important contract with a client. What are you going to do about drawing such a poor picture on it?"
Seeing Daniel glaring at her with a scary face, unlike the Daniel who usually buys her whatever she wants, Lisa looked frightened and shrank back. "I'm sorry." I could see Lisa feeling down from across the kitchen counter. I quickly washed my hands and rushed over to her.
"Come on, there's no need to get so angry about it." "Of course I'm angry. This contract is already signed by the other party. What are you going to do?"
Daniel glared at us as if we were something filthy.
"It's your fault for leaving it lying around. Do you think Lisa could understand that it was a contract? Your parenting is at fault. Make sure you teach her properly."
The situation escalated with Daniel rebutting anything I said. Suddenly, Daniel pinched his nose and made a face. Before I even had to wonder what was going on, he blurted out,
"The smell of bedwetting is awful. Both of you, stay away from me."
Daniel yelled at me and Lisa. With an expression I had never seen before, Lisa became scared and cried out. But I didn't understand what Daniel was talking about. Bedwetting? Who was he referring to?
Who are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Lisa, you wet the bed, didn't you? This ammonia smell is definitely from that.
Daniel pointed accusingly at Lisa. Scared by Daniel's menacing look, Lisa was frightened. I answered for her.
Lisa hasn't wet the bed. Neither her bed nor her pajamas are wet.
Though Lisa had wet the bed a few times when she was much younger, it was only temporary, and she hasn't had any incidents in the past year. Daniel, who usually spoils Lisa without paying much attention to parenting, probably doesn't understand these details.
What?
Daniel's eyes widened.
What do you mean by the smell of ammonia? It does smell a bit, but it's not Lisa.
When I brought my nose close to Daniel's clothes, there was indeed a faint smell. But it was so slight that it could be dismissed as a misunderstanding.
What are you talking about? This smell is obvious. Both of you are annoying me. Just stay away from me, or better yet, leave.
Daniel, possibly hungover and not thinking clearly, spoke to us more roughly than usual. I thought this might be my chance to get away from Daniel.
Understood.
I distanced myself from Daniel and took Lisa's hand.
If you say to leave, we will. You take care of the house.
As if you could. You'll be back soon because you have no money. Daniel seemed to mock my decision to leave, not believing I was serious. Ignoring him, I began packing our things into a suitcase. Realizing I was serious, Lisa quietly watched me. After finishing packing, I took Lisa's hand and we left the house.
Then, goodbye.
Yeah, thanks for your efforts. Still mocking me, Daniel waved us off, standing at the entrance. I ignored him and left the house with Lisa. Sooner or later, I thought it was best to distance ourselves from Daniel. It's unfortunate for Lisa to be separated from her dad, but it's for the best. I convinced myself that keeping her near such a dad would have a worse influence. After leaving the house, I called the preschool to let them know Lisa would be absent today. We killed time at parks and cafes until the evening, when I contacted my friend Betty. When I asked if we could stay just for one night, Betty was more than willing, saying, "I wanted to talk to you about something, so this is perfect." Aiming for the time Betty would return from work, Lisa and I went to stay at her place. Sorry for the suddenness. Did I bother you? Not at all. We're supposed to help each other out when in trouble, right? Lisa, want some juice or something?
Yeah.
Lisa had met Betty a few times before and was fond of her. Betty was very fond of Lisa. Betty offered Lisa a glass of orange juice.
Thank you,
Lisa said with a smile. Seeing her smile, after being tense all morning, I felt relieved. So, what happened? Running away from home all of a sudden, what's going on? Betty asked about the situation, which made me feel more at ease. I told her about Daniel's overbearing nature and what had happened from last night through this morning. Just talking about it made me feel angry all over again. Betty listened with a solemn face. I figured it might be something like that. I've always had my doubts about Daniel's behavior. And Betty looked at me and Lisa in turn, as if she had something difficult to say. I debated whether or not to tell you this, Nancy.
What's wrong?
I wondered what Betty was about to say. I'm not sure if I should say this in front of Lisa, but it seems like Daniel is having an affair with a colleague of mine. Hearing Betty's confession felt like a dull shock pressing down on my head.
What do you mean?
I leaned in eagerly to hear more from Betty. Well, I braced myself as she began to explain. About a month ago, on a Sunday, 3 of us ladies from my department went to the beach. That's when a colleague called over Daniel and his friends. A month ago, on a Sunday? Could that be the day I suggested going to the amusement park and was told he had plans? Suspicion spread through my mind. Daniel came with 2 other guys, and we all ended up playing beach volleyball and having a good time. Oh, Daniel doesn't know me, right? I attended your wedding and have seen photos from Nancy many times, but Daniel had no idea I'm your friend. My mouth became increasingly dry, and I kept gulping down water. At that time, Daniel and my colleague Susan hit it off. Susan is beautiful and popular among the men at work. They really clicked and went off together after playing at the beach. I heard from Susan they've met up since then. I'm sorry, I know you might not want to hear this, but I felt I couldn't keep it to myself. I shook my head at Betty, who looked apologetic as she revealed the truth. So, Daniel was cheating. Although surprised, I realized I was surprisingly calm about it. Thank you for telling me. It's an eye-opener. I had been somewhat deferential to Daniel because he worked outside the home. But after hearing Betty's story, I realized there was no need for any deference. I won't go back to Daniel. I'll make sure he regrets this. If that's the case, I'll help too. Susan works in the same place as me, so maybe I can find out something. Betty and I looked at each other, firm in our resolve. The next day, I left Betty's house to get my hands on some documents. I'd be living in a hotel for a while, but I managed to secure a cheap rental apartment, and I'll be moving in soon. Betty had been asking Susan questions too. Susan, who adores Betty like a sister, apparently answered everything she asked. I was astonished by what I learned. Filled with anger, I waited patiently for the right time to act. Then, the day for retaliation finally arrived. Betty told me that Susan was planning to visit Daniel's house, my house, today. I left Lisa with Betty and headed to my own home. It had been exactly a month since I left, and it somehow didn't feel like my home anymore. Seeing a pair of heels at the entrance confirmed my suspicions. Just imagining what kind of conversation the 2 inside might be having gave me goosebumps. I quietly opened the living room door, but no one was there. Listening closely, I could hear a woman's voice from the bedroom. Hearing that, I burst into the room, my face turning red with anger. Daniel, so you were cheating after all. The sudden appearance of me startled the naked man and woman, who screamed and looked at me. What the hell are you doing? Who is this person? Ignoring the panicked couple, I calmly took out the divorce papers from my bag. Today, I came to deliver this. Here. I threw the divorce papers at Daniel's body as if to slap him with them. What's this? Showing up out of nowhere and handing me something like this. Are you crazy? If anyone's crazy for thinking this situation is abnormal, it's definitely Daniel and Susan. But knowing that rational arguments wouldn't get through to unreasonable Daniel, I continued. You withdrew money from our joint bank account, didn't you? What did you use that money for? I don't know. In front of Daniel, who pretended to be clueless, I presented a statement showing a balance of $5. Are you going to play dumb even after seeing this? If you don't know, shall I enlighten you? The money was all spent on Susan. Daniel froze on the spot. Susan, puzzled that I knew her name, looked at me as if I were a ghost. Oh, your coworker Betty is a friend of mine. Thanks for telling her everything about the affair, by the way. It saved me the trouble. So Daniel was just a source of money for buying you anything you wanted,
right? He did indeed buy anything for his daughter.
I shoved the screenshot of texts between Betty and Susan, sent by Betty, in front of them. It detailed the luxury bags bought for her, where they went out, and other explicit details of their affair.
A role to provide money? What's all this about?
Daniel was shocked, his eyes wide open upon learning his role. Susan trembled as the reality spilled from my lips.
Also, I heard this. Susan, you're struggling with bedwetting, aren't you?
Susan and Daniel turned pale. Yes, the reason Daniel accused me and Lisa of smelling like bedwetting a month ago was Susan. Daniel probably spent the previous day with Susan. Coming home drunk without showering, Daniel became sensitive to the smell of bedwetting that clung to Susan until the next morning.
Why would you? I'm sorry. But you're the one having an affair. Well, the worst one here is Daniel, of course.
I rebuked Daniel, who was frozen and pale-faced, once again.
Even with all this evidence, you're going to pretend you didn't have an affair? Give up and sign the divorce papers. And be prepared to pay the compensation and child support in the divorce trial.
Daniel showed a severely disturbed reaction at the mention of compensation and child support.
Huh? You must be joking. How am I supposed to pay for compensation and child support in a divorce trial? It's all your fault, isn't it? You always cared only about Lisa and never paid attention to me. Yes, it's your fault. You should be the one paying the compensation in the divorce trial.
Daniel trying to shift the blame onto me at this point was so childish, my anger reached its peak. Oh, I thought you always worked hard, so you should have money, right? Do you understand what you've done? Mocking my remote work and always spoiling Lisa. And on top of that, having an affair, why should I pay the compensation in a divorce trial? You do realize what you're saying is ridiculous, right? I no longer wish to have anything to do with you. You'll hear from my lawyer from now on. Goodbye. Leaving the naked Daniel and Susan behind, I left the house. From behind,
Hey!
Ignoring the shouting and the argument between Daniel and Susan, I left everything behind and headed straight to Betty's house. All I wanted was for Betty to listen to me. After leaving, I received several calls from Daniel, but I stubbornly refused to answer. Betty advised,
Just block his number.
So, I did exactly that and blocked Daniel's number. The rest should be handled by the lawyer. Thank you. I really owe you a lot, Betty.
I should be the one apologizing for keeping silent all this time. It's going to be tough for a while, but if you need anything, just let me know.
The kindness of a best friend felt so profound. I thanked Betty again and went back to my new apartment. Lisa, I'm sorry. You wanted to be with Dad, didn't you? Feeling guilty about taking Lisa away from her dad, I apologized to her first thing.
I love Mom the most. Dad smells, so it's okay without him.
Lisa's innocent response was both funny and endearing. A few weeks later, Daniel and I successfully divorced. I received $30,000 in compensation from the divorce trial, and he agreed to pay child support monthly. Susan seemed to have been involved with other men at the company as well and left the job after becoming uncomfortable staying there. Of course, she and Daniel had a fight and broke up soon after that incident. Daniel, having lost his family and mistress, ran out of money and credibility, lost his motivation for work, and was forced to resign. Now, he's working part-time in cleaning, struggling to pay off his debts. I can't feel sorry for him, it's entirely his responsibility. On the other hand, my remote work is going well, and I now earn over $4,000 a month. I'm making more than Daniel did when he was a full-time employee. If I can make Lisa happy with the money I've earned myself, that's all I could wish for. No longer be involved in family ties that exist only on paper. With such a shocking statement escaping Grace's lips at the wedding speech, the room went ice cold. Normally, it would follow with, "Thank you, Dad and Mom, for raising me for 27 years." Paul, who was about to become Grace's husband, froze next to her. I, too, withdrew the tears I had been shedding until a moment ago and stared at Grace. Then, unable to hold back the laughter bubbling up from deep within, I burst into inappropriate laughter. All guests turned their eyes towards me, standing at the very back. That line is more fitting for me, don't you think? Unbothered by the guests' stares, I flashed Grace a challenging smile. What? What do you mean? When Grace retorted with mockery, I finally stood up. My name is Stella. I'm 60 years old and currently work for a foreign consumer goods company. There's a reason why I say currently. After graduating from college, I moved through numerous companies. Having dreamed of working hard once I became an adult, I changed jobs every few years to advance my career after getting a job at a consulting company. I sought new challenges in various companies rather than staying with one, thanks to my fickle nature. My efforts were quickly recognized by my bosses, leading to promotions and substantial salaries at each company. Thus, at the foreign consumer goods company I currently work at, I have been making good progress, reaching top sales performance 3 years after joining. No woman has worked long and in various roles around my age, so promoting me seemed to enhance the company's reputation as a business that promotes women's career advancement. I'm now happily serving as the sales department manager. I have a very blessed life at work. My career-focused life took a turn towards family 15 years ago, while working at a securities firm. That's where I met Kevin, my husband who is 2 years my junior. Kevin had been working in the accounting department of a securities firm since high school graduation. His gentle nature wasn't suited for sales, but his precision made him perfect for accounting. I had the opportunity to visit the accounting department from time to time, and Kevin approached me there. Though I felt I was too old for romance, Kevin was serious. Attracted to his sincerity, I eventually fell for him and initiated our relationship. Kevin was surprised and then blushed. Thank you. I feel the same way. Our pure-hearted exchange, albeit us both being in our 40s, led to laughter from us both. Our relationship flourished, and Kevin proposed within a year. However, I actually have a daughter, he revealed. Despite my surprise, I expressed my desire to marry him if he and his daughter were agreeable. Kevin thought it over and then decided to introduce me to his daughter, Grace. When I first met Grace, she was a 12-year-old elementary school student. Nice to meet you, I'm Stella. I greeted Grace with a smile, trying to be as non-threatening as possible. Grace returned the greeting with a smile. Hello. Her response put me at ease. See, Grace? You've got a mom now. Yeah. Grace nodded in agreement to Kevin's words and happily went back to her room. I wonder if she wasn't scared? No, she seems fine. I'm relieved. I'm relieved too. Grace is so cute. Kevin seemed pleased when I praised Grace. I learned he had separated from his wife 5 years ago. It seemed being complimented on Grace, who he had been raising alone, made him feel good. Which I understood. After Grace accepted me, we got married a month later. Our marriage settled into a routine where I worked late and Kevin got off on time and took care of home affairs. With Grace becoming a middle schooler next year, she could stay home alone for short periods. Kevin seemed to like housework, and I'm grateful because he does the laundry and cooking without complaining. I did my part around the house with cleaning and dishes, within my capacity. People around us would say, "How lucky you are to have a husband who helps out." Our marriage got off to a smooth start. Grace was a bit shy around me at first, but that quickly faded, and we became close enough to go out together. She wrote me letters on my birthday and even shared stories about boys she liked. Perhaps she longed for the female companionship and conversations she never had, being raised by a single dad. I tried my best to be Grace's mom. However, our close mother-daughter bond began to unravel a while after Grace entered middle school. She hit her rebellious phase. Her friends were all mischief makers, getting into makeup and late-night outings, making their way of having fun more extravagant. Grace, mingling with such girls, spent her days having fun, which naturally led to her grades dropping in periodic tests. "Grace, don't you think you're going out a bit too much lately? If you keep this up, you might not even make it to high school," I warned Grace for the first time. Grace, taken aback by my scolding, retorted, "Huh? Why do I have to be lectured by a stranger like you?" It was the first time I heard such heartless words directed at me. A stranger? We were getting along just fine until recently. I was just being polite. I had to be nice to you, or Dad would feel sorry. All the smiles Grace had shown me were fake. Realizing this filled me with frustration and helplessness. Grace continued to complain. "I thought about mentioning this before, but isn't your cooking bad? I want to eat Dad's cooking. Don't mix your laundry with mine. We're strangers, after all." About everything I did. Her criticisms were always delivered in Kevin's absence, revealing Grace's malicious nature. I considered discussing it with Kevin, but knowing he cared deeply for both his daughter and me, I knew it would sadden him. I didn't want to upset him or add to his worries, so I never brought it up to him. Grace's harassment escalated from verbal attacks to actions, like removing important documents from my bag before work or finishing off a cake Kevin had saved for me. Her ability to charm everyone meant Kevin never noticed her tormenting me, making me dread even seeing Grace. The attacks from Grace, which only worsened over the years, continued for 15 years. She still acted sweet in front of Dad. As she grew into adulthood, her antics became more troublesome, like withdrawing money from our joint account or stealing my precious jewelry. When I was about to reach my breaking point, "I'm getting married. The wedding is next month," Grace announced. "Really? So suddenly?" At 27, Grace was at a reasonable age for marriage. But the abruptness of a wedding next month left me struggling to keep up. What's wrong with sudden? Timing is everything in matters like this. Just so you know, I'll marry even if you oppose. Grace seemed uninterested in my opinion, quickly retreating to her room after merely informing me of her marriage. That night, I shared the news of Grace's upcoming marriage with Kevin. "What's this all about? I haven't heard anything. Bring Grace here right now," Kevin demanded in an unusually stern tone, so I called Grace back. "If you're getting married, introduce us to your fiancé. We'll talk about the wedding after that." Faced with Dad's reasonable demand, "Yes," Grace meekly responded. A week later, as promised, Grace brought her fiancé over. "Nice to meet you. My name is Paul." I apologize for the late introduction. Paul bowed respectfully to Kevin and me. He seemed to be a public servant from what we heard. His sincere appearance and manner of speaking pleasantly surprised us, considering we had braced ourselves for someone entirely different. After chatting for a while with the four of us, Paul made remarks that put Grace in a favorable light in front of us, revealing his serious nature. "See? He's a good guy, right? It's okay to marry him, right?" Grace, leaning forward, was eagerly looking at Kevin, not me, pressing him for an answer. "Yeah. Paul seems like a good guy, and I have nothing against it, but what about you, Stella?" "I'm all for it." Although surprised by Grace's sudden announcement, I was actually pleased because I thought Grace getting married would mean she would move out of this house. "Yay! Then the wedding is set for next month as planned." Sure. Grace left the house with Paul, both of them beaming with joy. I wonder if they plan to stay somewhere tonight. Paul and Grace seem to have quite different personalities and capabilities for life, but I wonder what will happen after they get married. Anyway, being able to get away from Grace was the happiest thing for me. Since Grace introduced us to Paul, she has been away from home more often. I thought she was busy preparing for the wedding with Paul, but one day I ran into Paul on the bus home from work. I had been working overtime for about 3 hours, as usual, but the commuter bus was packed. "Oh, isn't it Paul? Just finished for today? Good evening." "Yes, it's been busy lately." "Really? It's tough being a civil servant. By the way, how long has lately been?" "It's been like this for about a month now." "A month?" Hearing Paul's words, I suddenly became curious. It's been about a month since Grace started being away from home. But Paul has been having busy days every day. Then what exactly has Grace been doing, and where? I suppressed my desire to ask Paul and went home. Grace didn't come home this day, again. Something smelled fishy. It's been a month since I started suspecting something about Grace. Finally, the day of Grace and Paul's wedding arrived. Both Kevin and I couldn't help but reflect on everything up to this point, as it was our daughter's once-in-a-lifetime wedding. Kevin was moved to tears walking down the aisle with Grace in her dress. Thinking of Grace leaving my hands, I also cried, but for a different reason. However, to those around, it must have looked like a mom crying deeply over her daughter's wedding. The wedding and reception were a great success, and it was time for the highlight of the evening, the bride's letter to her parents. As Paul placed his hand on Grace's back, she began to read the letter. Kevin and I were, of course, crying again. I'd like to take this moment to say something to Mom." The beginning of the letter was unusual, and the audience was a bit restless. "I will no longer be involved in family ties that exist only on paper." With such a shocking statement escaping Grace's lips at the wedding speech, the room went ice cold. Normally, it would continue with, "Dad, Mom, thank you for raising me for 27 years." Paul was frozen next to Grace. I, too, retracted the tears I had shed until then and stared at Grace. Unable to suppress the laughter rising from the pit of my stomach, I burst into inappropriate laughter. The guests all turned to look at me in the back. "That's my line, you know?" Ignoring the guests' gazes, I gave Grace a challenging smile. "What? What do you mean?" Grace replied mockingly, so I finally stood up. As I walked from the back seat, I could hear the guests whispering about what was happening. The wedding staff seemed flustered in the corner of my vision, but I continued regardless. "You might not know, but I've been the one paying for your mobile phone and insurance bills, not Dad. And when I heard you were getting married, I thought I no longer needed to pay for those, so I changed them to be deducted from your account." "What? What are you talking about?" Grace glared at me with the corners of her eyes lifted. I did exactly what I had just explained. Hearing that Grace was getting married, I thought my role was over, so I had arranged for the various expenses I had been paying on Grace's behalf to be taken care of without my intervention. Grace probably assumes that Dad is the main financial supporter of the household. However, the reality is different. I earn more than Kevin, so I have been the one paying for the house mortgage, the car loan, everything. It's just as I said. You've been playing the good daughter in front of Dad while bad-mouthing me behind my back. So, when I heard you were getting married, I was genuinely happy. Finally, I could cut ties with you. Just like you said, I don't want anything to do with a stranger who's only related by registry. The murmurs of guests whispering to each other reached my ears. Grace's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. Paul, on the other hand, turned pale. "What are you talking about? That's a lie. There's no proof I've ever badmouthed you, you awful hag," Grace exclaimed and then clamped her mouth shut as if realizing she had said too much. A decent person wouldn't use such words against their parent, would they? Caught in the act, Grace glared at me, tears welling up in her eyes. Seeing Grace like this, Paul began to tremble. "What are you saying to your own parent? I thought you were a nice, polite, cheerful girl, but I had no idea you were this twisted. This is marriage fraud. I'm calling off the wedding right now." Hearing Paul's furious declaration, Grace looked shocked. She must have never imagined her own words would trigger the cancellation of her engagement. She started to protest, as if wanting to say stop anything but that.
What are you talking about? I haven't told you yet, but I'm pregnant. It's only been 6 weeks, so you wouldn't have noticed. And you're saying you won't get married? That's irresponsible.
The word pregnant stirred murmurs around us. But I was expecting it. Paul, however, showed no sign of being flustered by Grace's announcement. Grace, on the other hand, was confused by the unexpected reactions from me and Paul.
What's the matter? Too shocked to respond? For the sake of the child, we have to get married, right?
Grace wore a triumphant smile. It seemed she thought that bringing up the pregnancy would make Paul unable to refuse marriage. But Paul, with a somber face, said in a low voice,
"Is that child mine?"
"What?" Paul's expression darkened. I listened to Paul's words with bated breath.
"I always took precautions when we were intimate. You know that, right? And yet you boldly claim to be pregnant. Is that child really mine?" "What are you?"
Now it was Grace's turn to tremble. I seized the moment to speak up.
"No, it's not. I've heard that Paul has been busy this past month. But you, Grace, often came home late or were gone the whole day, despite only working part-time. There's no overtime in your job. So, where and with whom were you wandering around?"
I edged closer to Grace. Her expression twisted further.
"That was with friends."
"I have friends, you know." Grace's desperate reply made me unable to stop laughing.
"Friends? It's strange for friends to be arm in arm entering a hotel, don't you think?"
I thrust my mobile phone screen in front of Grace's eyes. In fact, since I began suspecting Grace, I had started an investigation into her infidelity. I couldn't bear the thought of Ernest Paul being deceived. I poured the money I earned into hiring a detective, and soon enough, evidence like this came to light.
"What is this? Bringing this up is just low. You're not a mother. I've never heard of a mother slandering her own daughter."
Grace screamed through the microphone, causing everyone to cover their ears. Despite there being no room for excuses, Grace still refused to admit her guilt, which made her seem even more pitiable. I was about to speak again when I heard footsteps approaching from behind. Stopping next to me was Kevin.
"I've been listening to the conversation, but what's going on here?"
Kevin's voice, low and seemingly coming from the depths of the earth, made Grace tremble. It was the first time I had seen the always gentle Kevin express anger like this.
"Dad, this is a misunderstanding. I haven't been unfaithful. How can you lie so calmly? You're about to get married, and you have a child with another man that's not Paul? Stop joking around."
Grace shivered at Kevin's stern voice.
"It's not just that. How can you speak to Mom like that after she's taken care of you for 15 years? I see you've been using such foul language towards Mom behind my back all this time. Mom has loved you like her own daughter, even though you're not related by blood. She's more competent at work than I am and earns more money. She's been the one paying for your education mostly. And yet, you repay her kindness with ingratitude. I won't forgive that. It's not true. Dad, Mom is lying. Please believe me. I'm your daughter."
Grace looked at Kevin with teary eyes, hoping for redemption, but Kevin quickly crushed that hope.
"Daughter? No. From today, you're not my daughter. My daughter wouldn't do such a cowardly thing. From today, we're cutting ties. Anyway, apologize to Mom, Paul, and everyone gathered here." "I'm sorry."
Grace apologized profusely and then left the venue in her wedding dress. I saw a man among the guests hastily leave the venue after Grace. Likely her affair partner. Inviting her affair partner to her own wedding was insanity. I was made painfully aware of how deranged Grace was.
"Paul, I'm truly sorry. Please allow me to apologize to the family members later."
I should be the one apologizing for not noticing what Grace was really like. Even in what must have been the hardest moment for him, Paul's consideration for us showed he was truly a good and earnest person. Kevin and I went around apologizing to the guests, and the unprecedented wedding was thus brought to an abrupt end. After that, Grace left the house. Or rather, Kevin told Grace,
"Don't come back."
Grace pleaded persistently,
"I'm sorry. I've reflected on my actions. Please let me stay here."
But Kevin did not forgive Grace. Likely considering the 15 years of scorn she had directed at me. I thanked Kevin and vowed never to associate with Grace again. Grace reluctantly rented an old apartment in the countryside after being denied a return to our home. Her affair partner turned out to be a man with no capability for living, only working part-time twice a week and loafing around. Grace probably thought her marriage to this man would be opposed. Perhaps she planned to marry the earnest Paul to satisfy us and then find a reason to remarry her affair partner. While her true intentions are unknown, neither Kevin nor I could accept Grace after she hurt Paul and acted selfishly. Although Grace had a job, it was part-time, so she must be living at her financial limits. She must be struggling to pay for even her mobile phone and insurance bills I used to cover. The hardship she's facing now is a consequence of the good life she once had. Grace might have many desires, but likely none are being fulfilled. But this is the result of her own actions. I believe she should learn the hardships of living through struggle. Meanwhile, Kevin and I have been enjoying peaceful days together. Kevin chose me, his wife, over his biological daughter. Kevin says, "Of course. I truly respect you, Stella. Let's continue to support each other." I'm truly happy, and Kevin, who diligently takes care of household chores, is a wonderful husband. I feel nothing but gratitude for our happiness. We've actually continued to stay in touch with Paul. Paul, once depressed by Grace's betrayal, seems happy with a new girlfriend recently. Though we should have no relation to Paul anymore, he seems to like us and occasionally invites us out for meals like a family. I wish to watch over Paul's happiness from afar. My husband has a curious name, Wyatt. I had no way of knowing that my mother-in-law's fierce wishes were contained therein when I met him. I'm Ashley. Currently 44. This story dates back to when I was 32 and discovered the origin of Wyatt's name. We met in college. We're the same age. He went on to graduate school, but I got a job. Then, at 27, we felt it was time to settle down, so we got married. He was serious and very reserved. He's so earnest that instead of saying "I like you" or "I like you a lot," he straightforwardly says "I love you." That's one of the things I loved about him. However, he had one worry. When we went to his family home for a family meeting, his mother, Madison, told us,
"We won't accept marriage unless we live together."
Oh no. But we were having such quality time together. When I said this depressedly, he said, "Then how about a runaway marriage?" Wyatt made this astonishing proposal. He's so serious, he might just do it. No, Having been loved by my parents all my life, the thought of being estranged from them due to marriage troubled me. Well, I'll continue working, so I'll be out mostly. It should be fine. I agreed. Are you sure? I've already received the entire inheritance, so even a runaway marriage would be fine, he said, with a straight face. His father had apparently passed away from illness when he was in high school. No, yeah, it's fine, I understand, for now at least. And so, with our marriage, living with my MIL began. Right with the cohabitation, the troubles started. Harassment towards me from day one. Isn't this supposed to start later on? We had a wedding reception at noon. We had moved our belongings the day before and started living in Wyatt's family home that day, but first, "Make dinner, please," was how it started. It's already past 6 p.m., and I'm tired from the wedding reception, but it's MIL's order, and I didn't want to start trouble on the first day. So, I'll make something from what's in the fridge. I said. There's nothing in it. She showed me the empty fridge. Start with the shopping, she said. And, don't talk to me every now and then. You're the last person to come into this house, which means you're the lowest here. I don't want someone at the bottom to talk to me casually. Also, find the cooking utensils and seasonings yourself, and manage somehow. So, without even being told where the nearest supermarket was, I ended up having to whip up dinner from scratch. I managed to locate the nearest supermarket using car navigation, but searching for spices and pots took a while. Finally, dinner was ready. Done! I called out only for Madison. But she called Myatt, who was upstairs, and said, "A delicious meal is ready. Ashley's tired, so I made it." Hey, wait. From the first day, this marked the beginning of a thorny path. Madison's harassment continued daily. Even after returning from work, cooking was my duty. Laundry, of course, was too. And she'd claim to Wyatt that she did it all. Her constant remark was, "You're not even family," to me. You come from another home, so you don't know the rules here. Look, even the way you fold this towel is wrong, she said. Could you teach me how to fold it, then? When I humbly asked, why should I teach someone who's not family, someone from another home? She'd retort, hearing our loud exchange, "What's going on?" Wyatt would come down from upstairs to the washroom. I started to say, Madison was complaining about the way I fold towels. But, Wally, listen! She's complaining about the way we fold our towels. Hanging onto Wyatt's arm, she raised a cry that sounded almost like sobbing. Reflexively, I was surprised and let out a strange sound like what? Such hollowness and blatant lies. Enough, this person isn't worth talking about, I'll ask Wyatt directly. I thought, shaking with anger. Just show me how to fold the towel. My voice laced with irritation. Well, if you pick it up from the folded edge, it unfolds, so. I think the folded part should face this way. I never really paid attention. He demonstrated how he folded the towel and placed it. Make sure you follow that, Madison shouted. But I think you should fold it however you like. That's what I think, Wyatt said, then added. Let's not shout about something like this. With that, he left. Then, you just tried to snitch. You're not even a family member. She confronted me with a fierce look. Snitch. I hadn't heard that word since middle school. And honestly, this kind of bullying, no offense, felt like something a middle schooler would do. I held back my anger. Madison's unfairness was clear, so naturally, I told Wyatt about it. Got it. I'll talk to Mom, he said while folding the newspaper he was reading. I said, but then, she'll just say I'm snitching again. Feeling down. Seeing this, he replied, No, but I've realized that Mom has been a bit too harsh on you. And just held me in his arms. One day, amidst Madison's relentless harassment, an incident occurred. A call came from the neighborhood supermarket. Your mother tried to leave the store without paying for the items. Is that Madison a shoplifter? I was at work, but our home phone was set to forward calls to my mobile, so I was immediately aware of the incident. Of course, Wyatt was at work too. I left work early to pick her up. There in the supermarket manager's office sat the manager and Madison. Madison, what have you done? It was such a shock that I burst through the door and confronted her directly. She snapped back. You're not family, go away. She kicked a chair in front of her and turned her face away, spitting the words out. What? It was her usual line, but I was speechless that she'd use it even in such a situation. I was frozen in place. It's all recorded on the security camera, the manager then said. I realized then that I hadn't apologized to the manager. It's not like people practice how to react when a family member is caught shoplifting, so I hope he'd forgive the oversight. Apologizing was the priority. "I'm very sorry for this," I said. Madison, upon seeing this,
"An apology from someone who's not family doesn't mean anything to me,"
she scoffed. This wasn't solving anything. And her attitude. Both the manager and I were stunned into silence. She kept sulking and turning her face away. 2 hours later, Wyatt arrived. Then, Wally. "It's finally happened, because of this DIL. She's been bullying me, and the stress." Madison suddenly burst into tears. The manager and I were speechless at her sudden change in behavior. After 2 hours of silence, this was her reaction. "I'm very sorry. We will pay double the cost of the items," Wyatt said, bowing his head.
"Shoplifting. This is unbelievable. And for 2 hours until you came, I was just being ignored."
"Actually," Wyatt stroked my back soothingly, "this isn't her first time.
"What?"
Shoplifting is like a habit for her. It's happened before. And you didn't try to do something about it? Surely, as a family. Dad used to handle it before he fell ill. It stopped after he passed away, but it started again when you came." I couldn't quite understand the logic behind it. I didn't understand, but
"I can't stay silent anymore because she's accused me of you're not part of my family, go home, and you are bullying me. I'm sorry, but I'm going to fight back."
He just kept silently stroking my back. 2 months later, another supermarket called about Madison shoplifted.
"Here we go."
Thumbs up for a family member's crime is inappropriate, but I was actually waiting for this. Holding a certain document, I stood up from my desk at work. The supermarket where she was caught was quite far from our house. Ascending the stairs to the waiting room where she was.
"How did you even get to this store from so far away?"
I heard the manager's loud voice from the door. The previous manager was slim, but this one seemed stout just from his voice. As I opened the door, indeed, there stood a large, burly man. But her response was unexpected. "By taxi."
"Taxi? You took a taxi all this way just to shoplift?"
The manager's voice, fitting his size, boomed again.
"I bet you've been banned from all the supermarkets in the neighborhood, haven't you?"
It was my turn to enter. This being the second time, I first apologized to the manager. Then turned to confront Madison.
"Madison, I do the shopping, don't I? You don't need to buy anything, so why go out to shoplift?"
As expected, Madison spat out her usual line. "You're not family, go away." Here it comes. I've been waiting for this line. I decided to confront her with every single fact.
"Then I'll leave. And by the way, Wyatt won't come to pick you up either." At that, Madison exclaimed, "What?" surprised by the unexpected answer. "I mean..."
I slammed the paper I had on the desk in front of her.
"You're not Wyatt's family, are you?" "What?"
Even the manager, with his large build, was taken aback.
"Do you understand this?"
I smile and say to the manager next to me. Her shoulders started to tremble.
"Since I was constantly being told you're not family, I thought I'd retort with I am a family member, look here, next time. So I fetched our vital records, and to my surprise, it turns out you're not the family member here."
Her shoulders trembled more violently.
"Wyatt knows all about why it's come to this. He's on his way here today. He's coming, but he won't be picking you up anymore." What?
Her face began to turn pale. Beside her,
What does that mean?"
the manager interjected. Being a stranger and moreover dealing with a shoplifter, he probably didn't want to get involved, but even as an outsider, this not a family member though a mother was too intriguing to ignore. "Well, you'll understand when Wyatt arrives," I declared confidently. On the evening I fetched the vital records and learned the truth, I asked Wyatt what it all meant. My birth mother was. That's when he revealed the truth to me. She passed away when I was in elementary school. The vital records corroborated this. And the name of Wyatt's deceased mother wasn't Madison, the woman living with us now.
Why didn't you tell me?
I had to ask, genuinely puzzled. I told you I inherited everything, right? I said that when we were talking about possibly having a runaway marriage, and I thought I had explained it then. Your words were far from enough. Typical of the reticent Wyatt. However, what he shared next was quite surprising. That too was about to be laid out before our eyes. As before, Wyatt arrived 2 hours late. I'm terribly sorry for this. He first apologized to the manager, Wally. In front of the vital records, Madison started to tremble. It's not true, you see.
It is true, isn't it?
She gasped and flinched.
You know what I'm talking about.
Wyatt let out a sigh. Then he began to explain again, intending Madison to hear as well. The most pitiful was the manager, forced to listen to the burdensome family issues of others after dealing with shoplifting, but he sat quietly and listened. The content was nightmarish, but no doubt intriguing. My birth mother passed away when I was in elementary school. As you can see from the house, we were wealthy, and we had a live-in housekeeper. That's her. She was the housekeeper. Her true identity revealed. She harassed my mom quite a bit. Perhaps she thought a child wouldn't understand, but I grew up witnessing it all. She constantly bullied Mom with "you're not family" and "you don't know the rules of this house because you come from another home," yet she never taught the rules. Mom was tormented by this until her death. From the first day of marriage, she was bullied relentlessly. When I was born, desperate for hope, she named me Wyatt, wishing me to be strong and brave.
Wait a minute.
Madison interrupted. I took care of you since you were in your first year of high school because Albert, before he passed, told me to look after Wyatt. I've been caring for you dearly ever since.
Dad indeed mentioned she will be like a mother from now on before he passed. He also said my inheritance was partly as a caretaker's fee for you. The rest became mine. That's why I've been calling you Mom. But Dad knew you were bullying my real mom. I directly heard and saw him reprimanding you several times. Each time, you cried and claimed Mom was lying and belittling you. When Mom passed, Dad, already frail, regretted relying on you for the mansion and me. Before he died, he told me, "Avenge Samantha."
Wyatt spoke calmly. To which,
"That's not true. That's not."
Madison cried out.
"I raised you like a natural child."
He responded.
Like a natural child.
He laughed. Wyatt, usually so reserved and not very expressive. It was the first time I saw him laugh in such a cold manner.
While Mom was alive, you claimed her cooking as your own. After she passed, you bought deli items, claiming you made them. I remember you washing containers. Now, you claim Ashley's cooking as your own. How can you keep lying about something as obvious as who made the food? Is lying to your natural child a part of being a mother?
The person we thought was Madison hunched over, trembling. Had she not realized we knew? Wyatt continued.
When you said you wouldn't approve the marriage unless we lived with you, I seriously considered a runaway marriage. You probably thought, with Dad's small inheritance gone, you needed me as a new golden goose. From our perspective, you're a complete stranger. If the house was gone, so would you. But then Ashley agreed to live together. She was loved by her parents, and I, despite being served deli items, was grateful for your care from my first year of high school to grad school. Even if you were living off Dad's inheritance. Once married, Ashley was forced to cook and do laundry, and you claimed it was your work. You're not family. You come from another home, so you don't know our rules. You bullied her just like Mom, without teaching the house rules. Seeing this, I decided to corner you thoroughly.
Dads will stated she will be like a mother from now on and avenge Samantha. I found a way to fulfill these seemingly contradictory requests. From my first year of high school to grad school, 9 years. I've supported you financially, even lived with you after marriage, but today marks the end of those 9 years. Regardless of the circumstances, today ends my gratitude for you acting as a mother. And as for avenging, that starts today. From today, I'll no longer recognize you as family. Naturally, as a stranger, you'll also need to leave the house. Wait, just wait a minute, really. Dad never married you because of all this, Wyatt stated firmly. A moment of silence followed. Wyatt must have been carrying various burdens since Samantha's passing. Today, everything was about to change. But I couldn't let the pressure of this change defeat us, so I gave his back a firm pat. Hey. He turned around. Samantha might have been tormented by this person, I said, pointing again at the vital records. But I won't fall ill. I won't be brought down by this. And I'll make you happy, compensating for the loss of Samantha. Just leave it to me. Wyatt cracked a gentle smile. The kind I hadn't seen before. So, Madison, or rather the stranger she truly was, ended up taken away by the police, as no one would take her in. It seems she was detained for a while. Later, she did come back, begging to be let in, but Wyatt resolutely refused to open the door. Being a habitual shoplifter, with no nearby supermarkets left to use, Madison moved far away. We received a message from her about her move and sent her belongings, postage due, to a very distant place, 3 states away. Years passed since then. We now have 2 children, and our life is serene. The reason I'm recounting this story now is that yesterday Wyatt suddenly started speaking out of nowhere. By the way, he said, there was another reason behind my name. He prefaced, it's probably not a big deal. Then started his story. The year I was born, John Wayne passed away. Dad, a fan of westerns, wanted to name me John, but Mom, who had her quirks, didn't want to settle for just John. Instead, she thought of a western hero. Wyatt Earp! I burst out laughing. That must have been the main reason for the name. I just love this natural side of Wyatt. A quiet man doesn't have to be boring. With Wyatt and our children, our life ahead holds no tears. Only smiles for tomorrow. My husband is out on a shopping trip right now. When we visited our eldest son's apartment to celebrate our first grandchild's birth, the door was opened by his wife, who did not hide her annoyance and frowned as she tried to close the door. In a panic, I handed over a $3,000 gift for the celebration. If there's anything I can help with, just say it. Things might have changed since our time, but I want to support you as much as I can. Raising a child is very hard. I said this hoping to lighten the load for my eldest son's wife, Elizabeth, but it backfired. Don't act all high and mighty, we're cutting ties with in-laws like you. Elizabeth shouted and threw the gift envelope I had just handed her into the trash bin by the entrance. My husband and I were speechless at her actions. Elizabeth glared at us fiercely. I didn't want to hear such nonsense, that's why I didn't invite you. But he invited you without asking me. It seemed that Donald had unilaterally decided to allow our visit. Elizabeth was unforgiving and started to complain about our son. It's unbelievable to invite people home without my consent. Donald is so useless. I made him go shopping on purpose, thinking he would let you in if he was here. After saying this, she emphatically told us never to come again and closed the front door. Then immediately, we heard the sound of the lock. I could no longer think of my eldest son's wife, who had insulted our son and trampled over our feelings of celebration, as family. Overwhelmed with irritation, we decided to cut ties with her. My name is Madison. I've been married to Jeffrey for over 30 years, and we're still close. After our marriage, we had our eldest son, Donald. 2 years later, George, our second son, was born. On holidays, my outdoorsy husband would plan hiking and camping trips for the whole family. Hiking is tiring but gives a satisfying sense of fatigue. I had a blessed life, both in my career and personal life. But life changes. Once our sons started working, Donald and George moved out for solo living one after another. I felt indescribable loneliness as the frequency of direct or even written conversations with my sons, who I used to talk to every day, decreased. Perhaps thinking of me, or maybe feeling lonely himself, my husband invited me to hiking. We hadn't been to the mountains since our sons became university students, but after this event, we often went hiking together. After a few months, we began to settle into our new life. Our sons started contacting us more frequently, and about once every 2 months, they would come home. Though life had changed from when we lived with our sons, it felt right. The loneliness faded, and my husband and I started to enjoy our life as a couple. As our sons approached the age we were when we got married, Jeffrey and I reminisced about our past and discussed their futures. We only had boys, right? I always dreamed of getting along with our sons' wives like real daughters, going to cafes and shopping together.
That would be nice. I want to take my grandkids to hiking. Gotta stay healthy and illness-free.
We shared our dreams, eagerly awaiting good news from our sons. Then, about a year later, our eldest son, now in his 4th year working as a professional, informed us he got a girlfriend. That day, my husband and I celebrated with a drink, overjoyed by the news. But since then, Donald stopped coming home, wanting to know who his partner was and longing to see our son happy. "When will you come home next?" I reached out several times asking. He would reply, "Maybe next holiday." But it never happened. On the day, a message would come. "Sorry, can't make it." And both my husband and I were disappointed again and again. He must really enjoy being with her girlfriend. I remember when Jeffrey and I first dated, I couldn't get enough of being with him. I said this to myself, convincing myself to wish happiness for Donald and his partner, and began to look forward to building a mother-daughter-like relationship with my son's wife. Half a year later, Donald finally brought his girlfriend home. They were planning to get married and came to greet us. My husband and I tried to contain our excitement, eagerly awaiting the day. But when we met Elizabeth, Donald's girlfriend, there was an indescribable atmosphere. At first, I thought she was just nervous, but her words hinted at some hostility. "Elizabeth, please take good care of Donald. If you ever need anything, just let us know." Even though I said this with a smile, Elizabeth did not smile back. Instead, "We'll manage on our own," she coldly replied. The mood was far from cordial, and Donald sighed. Eventually, after about an hour, the two of them left. "They're just independent. That's a good thing," my husband said, trying to cheer me up. "They're not children anymore. Let's just watch over them." "Yes, you're right. They'll have to live their lives together, after all." Disappointed, I decided to step back and support them from afar. After discussing with my husband, we decided to give them $10,000 as a wedding gift. When we made the deposit, Donald called to thank us. "Thanks for the money. We'll use it for the wedding." "Is the wedding planning going smoothly? Elizabeth, would she like to wear my wedding dress?" I had bought a wedding dress for my own wedding. Though I'd hoped to pass it on to a daughter, I thought it would be nice if my son's wife could wear it. "I'll ask her. Send me a picture of the dress." So I took out the stored dress, took a photo, and sent it. But soon after, we received a refusal. "She's already chosen a dress she wants to wear." Of course, there are preferences in dress design and style. I was a bit disappointed, but what could be done? "That's fine. If there's anything else we can help with, just let us know," I replied. But again, a disheartening response came. "We're handling everything ourselves." Indeed, a wedding is for the couple themselves. Still, feeling excluded, I couldn't help but worry. With a heavy heart, I attended my eldest son's wedding. The ceremony, enveloped in happiness, concluded smoothly. The reception was lively, with delicious food, and Donald looked very happy. Seeing my eldest son like that eased my anxiety. After changing outfits, the newlyweds went around for photos. Elizabeth, unlike when she first greeted us, was all smiles. At the bride's side, they posed for many photos, so I looked forward to our turn. But when Elizabeth reached us, "What's the next pose?" the photographer asked her. "We're moving to the next table," she replied. I was shocked. Seeing my reaction, Elizabeth gave me a cold look and said sharply, "The star of the wedding is me. I don't have time to fuss over the in-laws." And with that, she quickly moved on to the next table. As if I wasn't feeling low enough, another shock awaited me. Elizabeth was pregnant and would be having their first child in 6 months. It was certainly joyful news, but I learned of it through the words of the ceremony's MC. Looking around, it seemed Elizabeth's parents and relatives already knew. In contrast, we and the other relatives on the groom's side were visibly surprised. "Why didn't you tell us?" I couldn't contain my feelings and asked Donald. Without any sign of regret. "Elizabeth didn't want to tell anyone outside of those she's close with," my eldest son said. That we, soon-to-be family, were not considered close was astonishing to me. I could barely stand. Pregnancy can upset hormonal balance, causing irritability. I read it in a comic. It must be why Elizabeth's been so harsh. George kindly tried to console me, seeing how upset I was since the photo session. I had felt a distance from Elizabeth since she first greeted us, but still hoped we could gradually become closer and build a good relationship. I didn't want to give up on our relationship with Elizabeth. But maybe it was impossible. My faint hope of getting along well with Elizabeth vanished entirely. And after the wedding, we barely communicated with the newlywed couple as days passed. Worried about Donald's absence, George occasionally visited us. 6 months after the wedding, we got a message from our eldest son. "The baby was born." The photo sent with the message showed a small baby wrapped in a blanket. Though I hadn't been involved and did not feel like I became a grandparent, I still wanted to celebrate. When I expressed our desire to visit, Donald quickly invited us over, and my husband and I headed to their apartment the next holiday. But when we arrived at the appointed time, our son was out. "Donald has gone shopping." Elizabeth, opening the door, didn't hide her annoyance and frowned as she tried to close the door. In a hurry, I handed her a $3,000 celebration gift.
"If there's anything we can help with, just say it. Things have changed since our time, but we want to offer whatever support we can."
Child-rearing is very hard. I said this hoping to lessen Elizabeth's burden, but it backfired.
"Don't act all high and mighty. We're cutting ties with in-laws like you,"
Elizabeth yelled and threw the gift envelope I had just handed her into the trash bin by the entrance. My husband and I were speechless at her actions. Elizabeth glared at us.
"I didn't want to hear such nonsense, that's why I didn't invite you. But he invited you without asking me."
It must have been Donald's decision to allow our visit. Elizabeth seemed unforgiving, starting to complain about our son.
"It's unbelievable to invite people home without my consent. He's so useless. I made him go shopping on purpose, thinking he would let you in if he was here."
Hearing the true feelings of my son's wife, I was dumbfounded. Taking advantage of our silence, she continued.
"I'll tell Donald you saw the baby and left in a hurry. Please don't come again. It's a nuisance."
As Elizabeth was saying this,
"Wait!"
she ignored my voice and closed the front door. Then, I heard the sound of the lock being engaged. I realized I was clenching my fists tightly, shocked by what just happened in front of me. My husband didn't say anything, but it was clear he was angry. We could no longer think of Elizabeth, who had called our son useless and trampled on our feelings of celebration, as family. Frustrated, we decided to cut ties with her. After that, there was no contact from Donald for 6 months. Though we had cut ties with our eldest son, our younger son George introduced us to his girlfriend Stella, and they started visiting our home occasionally. Initially wary because of Elizabeth, I gradually warmed up to Stella, who always greeted me with a smile. Eventually, they got married. They even considered moving in with us, thinking about our future. My mom and grandmother were very close. I hope to have a similar relationship with Madison, Stella told me. I was so moved I almost cried. Seeing my reaction, my husband said, "We would love that." And so, we decided to live together with our son and his wife. At the wedding, Stella wore my wedding dress. Both she and her parents. "Thank you for letting me wear such a beautiful dress," thanked me. While feeling happy, I couldn't help but be disappointed with my eldest son and his wife's behavior. Elizabeth seemed to be in a bad mood at the celebration and ignored us throughout. Donald didn't do anything about her behavior. I was only worried if our younger son and his wife were upset by their attitude. But, to our relief, they looked happy after the ceremony. "Thank you for yesterday. It was a wonderful memory," Stella said to me with a smile the next day. Later, Stella became pregnant, and I took over the household chores, thinking of her burden. But whenever I looked away, Stella would try to help. "Stella, please rest. I'll handle it." "Madison, you're too protective. I'm fine with doing this much." While having such exchanges, I felt happy living with my son, his wife, and my husband. That day, my husband and George went hiking together, and we were having a relaxed time. Then, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Elizabeth and a young girl who had attended George's wedding. I hadn't been told anything at the wedding, but seeing the girl who resembled Donald, I was sure she was his child. The girl seemed not to recognize me and hid behind Elizabeth, looking scared. "It's been a while, Madison. Good to see you're well." Contrary to her past behavior, Elizabeth greeted me politely. Then she started. "Well," she began to tell her story. "Life has become tough recently, and I came to ask for support." "Support?" "Yes. I quit my job because things weren't going well with my boss. But right after I resigned, Donald was fired. His salary was cut, and he was almost transferred to a subsidiary, so he quit too." Donald tried to find another job but hasn't secured a stable position yet, leaving them both essentially unemployed. Elizabeth had suggested to Donald to ask us for support, but our son apparently refused. After quitting her job without consulting and finding out Donald was fired, Elizabeth called him useless. Donald seemed to be quite angry with her for that. Since then, Donald, who had always followed Elizabeth's lead, started to defy her. "That's why I came here directly," she said with a troubled look. But all I wanted to say was, "So what?" From our conversation, it was clear that her attitude was the reason things didn't work out with her boss, and I could understand why our eldest son was angry with her. It was too convenient for her to seek help only when in trouble, especially after she caused us to sever ties. But she was desperate for my sympathy.
I even asked my parents, but they refused any financial help. You're the only ones I can turn to. We'll starve at this rate.
Elizabeth pleaded with teary eyes.
Please help us.
However, my heart remained unmoved. I refuse.
Why? It's all because Donald quit his job. As parents, shouldn't you feel responsible and help?
Responsible? You're adults, sort your own issues. You're the ones who cut ties, remember? We're saving money for Stella's pregnancy and our soon-to-be-born grandchild. We have no money to spare for you.
What? That's ridiculous.
Her weak demeanor changed instantly. The moment I refused, Elizabeth raised her voice.
Why support your younger son's wife and not help us?
At this moment, I was approached from behind.
Madison, are you okay?
Worried that I hadn't returned, Stella had come to the entrance. Seeing Stella, Elizabeth's face turned red with anger.
You're living together, too. That's not fair. I'm the wife of the eldest son. It's wrong for the wife of the younger son to move in. Get out.
Startled by the sudden shouting, Stella tensed up.
It's you who should leave this place.
I immediately stepped forward to defend Stella.
Stella proposed living together, considering our future. Unlike you, who only think of yourself. What? Just because I treated you a bit harshly, you favor her? Fine, if you don't support us, you'll never see this child again.
With those words, Elizabeth forcefully pushed a hidden girl to the front. Seeing the girl on the verge of tears, I felt something snap inside me.
You're really the worst kind of person. Huh? Say whatever you want. I've always disliked your preachy attitude. If you care about the child, don't use her as a tool. If you don't change your ways, we'll cut ties with you. Don't ever come to our house again. Don't joke with me, you miser.
Even after this, Elizabeth continued to fuss, using her daughter to sway us, but I never nodded in agreement. Though I thought to let her rant as she pleased, seeing the girl scared by Mom's yelling, I decided to take a drastic action.
If you stay any longer, I'll call the police. Leave quickly if you don't want to make a big deal out of this.
At the mention of the police, Elizabeth, who had been bustling about, stopped talking and left with a look of despair. Later, I heard that Donald and Elizabeth were struggling to find new jobs. Despite finding each other's presence intolerable, they couldn't afford to separate due to lack of assets, and so they were stuck together. They were always fighting. And their bad reputation spread in the neighborhood. They were even reported to the child welfare office, concerned about the bad influence on the child. For the child's sake, my husband and I are considering taking her in. Several months later, Stella safely gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Since her parents' home was far away, Stella didn't go back, so I dedicated myself to supporting her. George and my husband dote on her.
When she grows up, the 5 of us will go hiking together.
They are excited about it. I am committed to doing everything I can to ensure this happiness continues.
My name is Nancy. There's a world out there I don't know about. I learned about it as a child, watching TV. Animals living in the wild, landscapes I've never seen before, and the lives of various people who speak different languages. Wanting to see this unknown world up close, I bravely studied abroad during my college years. There, in my destination, was the unknown world I sought. Even though the language was different, people's lives were thriving. There were many creatures, and breathtaking landscapes unfolded. I want others to experience this wonder too. Thinking that, I got a job at a travel agency. I was in charge of tour planning at my assigned department. Using what I learned during my study abroad, I handled everything from site inspections to negotiations. It was indeed a whirlwind life, but I wasn't neglecting my personal life. I married Daniel, whom I met through work a few years ago. I was balancing work and family life well, but then a problem arose. It was with my mother-in-law, Barbara. Barbara, a housewife, believes women should stay at home after marriage. I don't deny her viewpoint, but I think such an idea is outdated. I told her so, but she said to me, "Isn't it a woman's job to support Daniel? Do you have a problem with that?" But, what? Talking back as Daniel's wife? No. Ultimately, Barbara didn't understand. I didn't want her to impose her views on me. I couldn't live with Barbara like this. So, I suggested buying a house to Daniel. I think people's view of us will change if we buy a house. Just saying that, Daniel easily agreed to buy a house. This is how I avoided living with Barbara. But the story didn't end there. Once we bought the house, Barbara started coming over often. Every weekend, she'd come and make noise with Daniel. Of course, she didn't take care of her husband, Anthony. "Barbara, is it okay to leave Anthony alone? He's not a child. He'll manage. Wasn't supporting a husband a woman's job?" I wanted to retort, but I could see it leading to a fight. So I kept quiet. Then Barbara, who had been noisy with Daniel, suddenly started a conversation. I forgot to say, but I'm going on a trip next week. Please be careful. What are you saying, Nancy? You're coming too! But it's so sudden. You're not planning to join the family trip as Daniel's wife? But there's work, too. It's a family trip. Are our in-laws not family to you? That's not what I mean. Then make it happen. Yes. I couldn't talk back. But that was still the better part. Seeing me troubled, Barbara said in a mean tone, and book the hotel. I should? Always bragging about working at a travel agency, right? I'm not bragging. So, you can do it, right? Where are we going? London. London, where I studied abroad. I still have many contacts there. It might be difficult for other countries or regions, but maybe I can manage London. Okay, I'll try. I have the plane tickets, so just book the hotel. You booked the flight, but not the hotel? I got the tickets! Got them? I exchanged my card miles for first-class tickets. Barbara grinned. Judging by her joy, it seemed true. Then I noticed piles of branded goods on the sofa. I see. I understood. Hearing first class, Daniel leaned in. First class? Seriously, Mom? Yes, it's a first-class trip abroad. Awesome. We will leave at 9:30 p.m., so you can work till the last minute. Barbara was still grinning. It felt odd, but there's no point in lying about going on a trip. I have to properly book the hotel or she'll complain. But it's so sudden. Finding a hotel might not be easy. After some thought, I decided to use my old contacts from my study abroad days to get a hotel referral. I asked over the phone, "Can you do it?" For Nancy's request, sure. 4 people, 2 rooms. Thank you! With that, I successfully booked the hotel. Then, on the day of the trip, it was such short notice that I couldn't take the day off, so I was working. Barbara had told me to meet up at the airport at 6 p.m., so if I wrap up work soon, I can make it. That's what I thought, when suddenly, Barbara called. Hello, Barbara? Nancy, are you done with work? I'm just leaving the office now, so I'll be at the airport after 6 p.m. Oh, that's too bad. Huh? Well, we're actually leaving at 6 p.m. No way! I hurried back to my desk. I searched the flight schedule on my computer. London. I found the 9:30 p.m. flight I initially heard about, but there was also a flight leaving after 6 p.m. Could it be this after 6 p.m. flight? Yes, so the family is going without you. If you leave me behind, what about Anthony? You're supposed to be sick. I was furious. How could she plan so thoroughly to leave me out? Unforgivable. But showing my frustration would be playing into Barbara's hands. I had to hide my feelings, even if it meant putting on a brave face. I clenched my teeth and said to Barbara, I'm the one who booked the hotel. So? Daniel knows the hotel name. You can't do anything now. I could hear Barbara laughing on the other end. Annoyed, I said, Go without me then. That's better. We don't need a useless wife like you. Useless? What do you mean? Don't you know? What? You neglect housework for your job. Daniel is complaining. True, I'm busy with work, but I've never slacked off on housework. Why would Daniel complain? Can I speak to Daniel? Sure. Nancy wants to talk. Barbara's mocking voice was followed by Daniel's. Hello, what's up, Nancy? Daniel, what do you mean you're complaining about me? Just that. You're always at work and neglecting me. Neglect? I prepare meals, clean, and do laundry. But you think you're doing it all yourself, right? That's not true. Shouldn't you respect me more? Listen to me? Do things for me? Huh. I know, a wife who supports her husband is valued. It's convenient for the husband. But that's not all there is to a marriage. I never badmouth Daniel in public, always praising him, but not when it's just the two of us. But we need to speak our minds when alone. Otherwise, our relationship would fall apart, and I'd become nothing but a servant to Daniel. Yet, he kept complaining about me. So you think you can act all high and mighty because you earn more? Not at all. Anyway, that annoys me. And you're leaving me behind for that? Yeah, consider it stress relief. I'll bring you a souvenir, so don't worry. That's not the point. Clearly, Daniel was taking me for granted. If that's how it is, I have my own plans. Fine. Enjoy your trip. Will do. Bye. Daniel sounded happy as he hung up. I was livid. I couldn't stand the self-centered Daniel and Barbara. Enjoy your trip without me, but be prepared. Even if you come back crying and apologizing, I won't forgive you. I rushed out of the office with my mobile phone. Hey, hello, it's Nancy. Are you free? I need to talk about that hotel booking. With the trip canceled, I had plenty of time. I'll settle everything now. I ran around with that determination. Then, the next evening, exhausted, I got home, and right then, the phone rang. Hello? Nancy! What were you thinking? It was Barbara on the phone, sounding quite angry. I knew the reason, but pretended not to. Barbara, are you enjoying the trip? This is no time for that. We can't check into the hotel. Did you have a reservation? You made the reservation, didn't you? I canceled it because I wasn't going. Huh, what? Then where are we supposed to stay tonight? I don't know. Nancy! Barbara's angry voice came through, but she's in London. Her anger over the phone isn't scary at all. That's tough. Being abroad without a hotel? You never know what might happen. It's not the safest place, you know. Wait! Wait, help me! Barbara sounded panicked. Then a faint voice in the background. There's a canceled room. Anthony's negotiating for us to stay there. It was Daniel's voice. Is that true, Daniel? Looks like it'll be fine. You see, Nancy? Heard that? Barbara's voice turned triumphant, as if her earlier tears were a lie. I heard ya. Too bad for you, Nancy. Your plan didn't work. Well, the room was available because I canceled it. But this was all part of my plan. My real aim was something else. Glad there was a vacancy. Thought you'd be smug about canceling our hotel, didn't you? No, not really. Frustrated, aren't you? You can admit it if you're upset. I just canceled it because I wasn't going. Putting on a brave face. How pathetic. Typical of Daniel's useless wife. Barbara laughed loudly. Then she went on bragging about the amazing scenery, delicious food, and so on. Eventually, tired of listening, I quietly hung up the phone. She probably didn't even notice. I smiled a little at that thought. Anyway, just a few more days to endure. I braced myself and had dinner. A few days later, on my way back from a certain place, as I headed to the station, Barbara called again. Hello? What's up? Nancy! What's going on? Again? Not again! What's wrong with this hotel? What are you talking about? Barbara's story, in short, they stayed in the room I canceled, thanks to Anthony's negotiation. Anthony's negotiations were easily concluded. Barbara and her friends were to stay in an open room. They were supposed to stay for 4 days and check out today. But there was a problem. They were billed £8,000 by the hotel. So what's the issue? It's £2,000 per night, right? Huh? That's about 2.5K per night in dollars. Ridiculous! It's for 2 rooms, right? So about 1.2K per room? You told Daniel it was $300 per room per night. Yes, I did. So it should be $600 for 2 rooms. Why is it 4 times more? I was astonished. They stayed without even checking the room rates. Well, I anticipated this, so I set it up accordingly. Anyway, Barbara, making a fuss on the phone, must be bothering others. I should calm her down. Hey, Nancy! You hear me, Nancy? Barbara, can you be a bit quieter? Why did you lie? She's good at accusing others without reflecting on herself. Exasperated, I began to explain to Barbara. The $300 rate was because I made the reservation. Huh? So because it was last minute, I asked a friend who runs a hotel. A friend? Yours? Yes. Their hotel offers rooms for around $600 for 2 people. Then why $1,200? That's the rate for a really nice room. My friend did me a favor. A favor? There were no other vacancies, so they arranged a nicer room. So, is this the regular price? Barbara sounded flustered. When I heard from Barbara, there was no time left for the trip. So I told my friend any available room would do. The only vacancy was an expensive suite. My friend kindly gave a discount. Barbara left me behind without asking. I immediately told my friend the situation and got the room canceled. But I couldn't just leave Barbara and the others without a hotel. So I asked to accommodate them at the regular price if they came. I knew Barbara, having heard about the hotel from Daniel, wouldn't check the price. And I was right. Come on, you should have said that. Yelling won't help. Please make sure to pay. We're not paying. Nancy, you pay. But if you don't pay, you'll be arrested. Arrested? Of course. Troubles abroad can be messy. Are you okay with that? Barbara seemed at a loss for words. As I was about to hang up, thinking I had won, Barbara shouted, "Don't mess with me! You'll regret this when I get back!" That's fine, but we're strangers now, right? Huh? Why? Well, you said it was a family trip, so since I'm not there, I'm not family, right? That's different! Before she could finish, Anthony's voice came from the phone. What's all this yelling about? Be quiet! It's embarrassing! Anthony? Seizing the opportunity, I called out to him. He noticed and responded. Nancy? Are you okay? How's your cold? I never had a cold in the first place. What? Give me that! It seemed Anthony took the phone from Barbara. His voice grew louder. Nancy, can you explain everything? I can, actually. I told him everything from the beginning. His voice gradually lowered. I see. So that's why you didn't come. I'm sorry. I wanted to go. No, Nancy, you're not at fault. It's Barbara and Daniel. From afar. Hi! I heard a whimper. Barbara and Daniel seemed frightened by Anthony's anger. Realizing this, an idea came to me. Should I tell Anthony what Barbara has been doing? I thought so. So I turned to Anthony. Anthony, can I tell you something? What is it? Barbara comes to our house almost every weekend. I know that. And when she throws away receipts at our place, there are piles of them. What receipts? For brand goods. It's fine to buy a lot, but please dispose of the receipts at your place. Barbara wasn't just being noisy at our house. She was secretly buying brand goods and disposing of the receipts at our place to hide it from Anthony, thinking she wouldn't get caught this way. Of course, I'm a witness, so it's pointless. But it seemed Anthony didn't know. That's interesting to hear. Also, please tell her to stop bad-mouthing you at our place. She talks about me too? Yes. She says you don't earn much. Daniel, too. Calls him a useless dad, I think. Anything else? Well, so I spilled all my pent-up frustrations to Anthony. Of course, some of it wasn't directly related to Anthony, but he listened silently. And at the end, he apologized to me. I'm sorry. Now I understand. Understand what? Why Barbara didn't want to use her card to pay for the hotel. Maybe. Probably because the cost was much higher than she expected, close to her credit limit. I'm sorry. That was Barbara's voice. Unforgivable! All your wasteful spending, Barbara. I want a divorce. Please, don't do that! Anthony's shouting was followed by Barbara's pitiful voice. He also yelled at Daniel. Daniel, why don't you defend your wife? Well, that's... Don't come to my house anymore. Reflect on this alone. Yes, sir. Daniel sounded unusually obedient. Probably he thought being banished from his parents' house wasn't a big deal. That's when I struck the final blow. So, Daniel, looks like you're going to live alone now. Huh? What do you mean? Suddenly, Daniel's voice got louder. He must have grabbed the phone. I moved my phone a bit away and told him the situation. Daniel, I want a divorce. Ugh, a divorce? You're joking, right? No, I'm serious. I've already sold the house. You sold it? Why would you do that without telling me? That's our house. No, it's my house. But I was paying the mortgage too. No, you weren't. What do you mean? I was giving you part of my salary every month. That was for living expenses. A few $100s isn't enough for the mortgage. Daniel had been giving me a few $100s monthly. It helped with living expenses, but not enough for the mortgage. So I paid it alone. The house was in my name, so there was no room for complaint. This incident made me decide to divorce Daniel. I sold the house, full of unpleasant memories of living with him. So you'll be living alone. Wait! Think it over! No, it's decided. I'll contact you once I find a place. Then I'll send you the official notice. Official notice? Of course. I'll be claiming compensation in the divorce. Wait for me! Daniel was crying on the other end, but I didn't care. I hung up the phone. After that, Daniel and I divorced following discussions. Anthony actually divorced Barbara, too. Barbara, due to her wasteful spending, didn't get any compensation in the divorce and was left on her own. I was just thrown out of the room. Daniel was nearly broke, apparently having spent everything except the few $100s he gave me each month on frivolities. Now he's living in a run-down apartment and commuting to work. But things might be better for Daniel than Barbara. With no house or money, and Daniel's place too small, Barbara had to take a live-in job. She's working hard from morning till night now. As for me, I'm doing great. Being single, I have more free time and can handle overseas negotiations. I've become a relied-upon figure at work, even hearing talks of a promotion to department head. Today, I'm busy flying around the world, planning new tour packages.
Your shabby clothes just got an upgrade with that fancy wine spill. Lucky you.
It was my soon-to-be mother-in-law who said this after drenching me with her glass of wine. Does she think such rudeness is acceptable? She has no idea. I won't let her forget this. I'm Avery, a 25-year-old single office worker working as a clerk in a mid-sized company. I enjoy my job. It's fulfilling, and I have great relationships with my coworkers. I've been thinking of continuing to work, even after getting married. I'll take maternity leave when I have kids, and then return to work once things settle down. Recently, marriage started to feel more like a reality in my future. You see, I was recently proposed to by Dave, my boyfriend of 2 years. That night, at a restaurant with a beautiful night view, I spent time suspiciously watching Dave, unusually quiet and restless. At a scenic lookout later, He was still acting odd, constantly looking around and sighing. I couldn't stand the awkwardness anymore and blurted out, "Hey, are you proposing?" You know, after 2 years together, you just know these things. I'll never forget the look on his face at that moment. He turned red as a tomato, moving his mouth like he wanted to say something. I thought he might pass out from lack of oxygen. I told him, "Take a deep breath." Then, as if he'd made up his mind, he pulled out a ring. "Will you marry me?" he proposed. Wow. I recalled that moment and unintentionally let out a strange sound, clutching my head. The atmosphere then had helped me stay calm. But now, whenever I think about my behavior and Dave's face at that moment, it's too embarrassing, no matter how many times I recall it. I'm too inconsiderate. I keep telling myself, don't get carried away, marriage is just the beginning. But I can't help but grin. And my colleagues joke around and call me creepy. But right now, I'm too happy to care. Now with marriage on the horizon, first comes the family meeting. I told my parents over breakfast, I'm getting married. Is that so?
Oh, really?
That was it. Simple as that. My parents are easygoing like that. I'm so glad. Being a third of 4 siblings, I guess that's expected. We ended dinner on a great note. Now the problem is Dave's family. When we announced our engagement, they immediately wanted to meet me at their home. I was hesitant and wondering, should I go? But Dave reassured me.
They can wait until the family meeting,
he said. I was afraid they might insist I visit them. But honestly, I'm intimidated by the idea of going to Dave's house. After all, Dave is the son of a wealthy family. I only recently found out that Dave's dad, Greg, is the CEO of a well-known major corporation. Will everything be okay? I asked, worried. His response was not reassuring, his face filled with anxiety.
Our family is pretty unique, you know.
How so?
Like I mentioned before, Dad's company, which was started by my great-grandfather, is quite a big one.
Yeah, you told me about that.
Well, Dad is humble, always saying it's all thanks to our ancestors and the employees, not him. But the problem is my mom, Karen, and my sister Charlotte.
He spoke casually, not what you'd expect from a son of a wealthy family. I chuckled and nodded. Really?
Anyway, their boasting about being rich is just too much. I went to public schools all the way from elementary to high school. Mom always bizarrely looked down on other parents, saying, "Public schools are for poor people."
That's something.
Elementary middle school was one thing, but the high school was a slightly higher level public school, which I chose because I liked it. Fortunately, I had good friends and never faced any nastiness. But among the parents, they all talked about how my mother was crazy. It was so embarrassing.
What did Karen do?
At a PTA meeting, she apparently blurted out to the other parents, "You all are just plain and simple commoners."
Oh. I'm just a plain and simple commoner myself. Suddenly, I felt really uneasy. He continued.
Charlotte's similar, openly declaring she'll only date celebrities. She left, saying she cut off all her school friends because they weren't celebrities.
That's quite harsh.
That's why I wanted to avoid meeting at home. In a public place, and with your parents there, they'll probably behave. But just a heads up, if Mom or Charlotte says something weird, I apologize in advance.
Dave looked worried. I confidently assured him with a smile. It's gonna be fine. Though I was far from fine. The day of the family meeting arrived. The venue was a private room in an upscale restaurant Dave had booked. My parents were tense, but I was probably the most nervous. After all, compared to my parents who obviously have lived longer than me, I've rarely been to such places. We arrived early at the restaurant, and soon after, Dave's family arrived and we were shown to the room. There, Dave and I reported our engagement to our families and asked for their blessing. My parents responded,
"Congratulations, you two. Dave, please take good care of Avery,"
said my dad. Then my mom said, "Congratulations to you both, wishing you so much happiness," with the biggest smile. I was most worried about Dave's family, but his father, Greg, seemed very gentle and kind.
Congratulations, Avery. My son may not be the most mature, but I wish you both the best, he said. But then it began. Karen, the problematic one I had heard about. So you're the fiancé, huh? A bit plain for Dave, don't you think? She said, skipping pleasantries and assessing me. My parents and I were taken aback, but it was too early to be shocked. There was more. Next came Charlotte.
Wait, really? You're marrying someone this ordinary? That's crazy. You definitely don't know any cute celebrities. I wish you did, so you can introduce me to them. As we stood there stunned, Dave hurriedly said, Okay, let's enjoy the meal. But he couldn't change the awkward atmosphere. The soon-to-be mother-in-law and sister-in-law, unlike the normally dressed Dave and Greg, were in flashy, perfectly done hair and makeup, their jewelry full of large gems. I wondered if it wasn't too heavy. The makeup seemed a bit too much too. Their clothes, purses, watches, everything they wore was from high-end brands. It's like each item might be nice on its own, but altogether it's a brand traffic jam, mismatched and odd. I realized this seeing them in front of me. Wow, I don't think we'll get along, I thought. But then I told myself, marriage is also about enduring. We can't become a real family overnight, especially when we're still strangers. So I'll gradually get to know them. My noble intentions were completely disregarded, though, the next instant. Again, another blow in the face. Seriously, you really look plain. Hey, what brand is your dress?
Oh, it's not a particular brand.
Really? I can't believe this. Having someone like you as a sister-in-law is just the worst.
I have to try to understand them little by little, I said to myself. You definitely don't look like you have money. Maybe you're after Dave's money. I wonder if the neighbors will mistake you for a maid every time you visit. How dreadful.
Breathe. Hey Dave, maybe you should reconsider. Find someone more celebrity-like, and maybe someone who can introduce me to a cute celebrity. That would make a better sister-in-law.
Exactly, Charlotte's right. Look at this face. It screams poor, doesn't it? This is too much. In this battlefield of endless attacks, peace is impossible. In the corner of my eye, I could see my increasingly displeased parents, and even Greg frowning. Dave's face was redder than the time he proposed. He must be furious, but trying so hard not to lose his temper. But even more red-faced were the two in front of me. I thought there was wine, and indeed, Karen and Charlotte had almost drained all the expensive wine. And they were ordering more. Complete drunks.
I've never heard the company name. Being a clerk there is just hilarious.
I wish they could explain what was so funny about it. According to Dave, Charlotte's current social status is helping with housework. An endangered species, huh? But why do they scorn me, someone who actually works? Karen kept up her tone. How much do you make? Surely not less than 10K. It would be hilarious if your salary was that low. As for my husband's monthly income... Oh, I won't say it. Don't want you to go in shock. Oh. What's with that laugh? Is that how celebrities laugh nowadays? I couldn't move my gaze from them. Dave, sensing this, tried to stop his mom and Charlotte. But the drunken rampage couldn't be stopped. Then the drunks exploded at their peak.
We don't need a sister-in-law like this. Call off the marriage,
Charlotte said, holding a full glass of wine. Karen also lifted her wine glass, and then... What kind of poor family are you from? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I can't let my precious son marry someone like you. I'm not approving this marriage, she shouted. What? I exclaimed in surprise. Right after, I felt something drip from my hair. Huh? It was wine. Karen and Charlotte had thrown wine at my face. The scent of wine spread throughout the room, followed by a deafening silence. After that silence...
Cool, look, Avery, your cheap clothes now look fancy, thanks to the high-end wine. Lucky you.
Oh, that's true. Such a waste to use expensive wine on a gold digger like you. The laughter of Karen and Charlotte filled the room. What are you doing, you two?
Dave slammed the table, his face bright red, but the two nonchalantly continued drinking.
How rude of you to apologize to Avery,
Greg shouted, pale with anger, but they were unaffected. That's when my mom, who was wiping me off, yelled, "Stop this nonsense! Apologize to Avery!" All of a sudden, Mom's sudden outburst actually worsened the atmosphere. After an uncomfortable silence, my dad put his hand on my shoulder.
Let's go home, Avery. We'll talk about what to do next with Dave later.
Yeah. I couldn't stay there any longer. Looking at my wine-stained dress, I felt like crying.
Avery, sorry. I'm so sorry about...
Dave began to apologize, but his words were drowned out. Ha! Leave already. Poor commoners should go home, Charlotte said. The moment I heard that, my dad, who was pulling me, stopped and slowly turned around, stared down with a fierce gaze. Charlotte's face showed a hint of panic. That's the kind of presence my dad has, not allowing any backtalk. What's wrong? Got something to say? She retorted, not backing down. To her, Dad chuckled and said,
This is more of a warning or advice. Not that you'll believe it, but I'll say it anyway.
What?
Do you know how much resentment you've accumulated from people around you?
Huh? What are you talking about?
I can sense a lot of nasty spirits gathering around you two. Whether they are living spirits or thoughts, I don't know. But you're surrounded by something dark.
Huh? What are you talking about? Don't make up crap like that. You think I'd believe that?
I'm not asking you to believe me. When something unusual happens, then you'll feel it's convincing. That's all.
Something unusual? Charlotte panicked while Dad continued.
I can't tell if it'll be an illness or some misfortune, but the results will show soon enough. I've saved many people with this ability of mine. I know many who regretted not listening to my advice and came crying later. Now, let's see what will happen to you two.
If it were just those words, Charlotte and Karen wouldn't have believed him. They would have dismissed it as nonsense. But Dad's face, his intense look, and heavy tone turned their faces pale. You're joking, right?
I'm real as the wine you threw at Avery. I shouldn't be giving advice to people who treated Avery horribly. But it's hard to ignore the potential misfortune of my soon-to-be son-in-law's family.
Their faces turned pale under his presence. Karen and Charlotte started to tremble. Pointing behind them, Dad said,
If you know about that woman with curly hair and the one with dyed brown hair, you should apologize to them now.
How do you know about them? Charlotte screamed in fear, and with a glance, we left the scene. The day after the crazy event, Dave rushed to our house. He apologized deeply, vowing to cut ties with his mom and Charlotte. This raised his standing in our family. Then a few days later, Karen and Charlotte came to our house to apologize. We are so sorry. When I returned from work, they were at the doorstep. What a surprise. There they were, Karen and Charlotte apologizing deeply with my mom looking perplexed, and my dad standing with arms crossed, looking stern. What's happening? As I wondered, Karen yelled out,
Just like you said, I got diagnosed with a serious illness. I felt something was off and got it checked out, and it was nearly too late.
Charlotte also yelled, I thought I met a great guy, but he turned out to be a scammer. After being warned, I hired a detective and couldn't believe what he found. If I hadn't listened to your advice, I would have been a victim. And again, the two of them apologized. We're so sorry for our rude behavior, they said in sync. There was Dad, squatting in front of them, looking down at them on the floor. He looked like a delinquent with an e-cigarette in his mouth, then spoke in a very low voice.
You two are apologizing to the wrong person. Shouldn't you apologize to someone else first? With that attitude, the bad spirits won't leave, and more misfortune will come your way, you know. Charlotte, in a panic, said, You're right. Then she turned to me and apologized deeply again. Avery, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I've learned that money isn't everything in this world. And Karen also apologized again. I'm sorry for doing such terrible things to someone with such an incredible father. I'm now sure you and Dave will build a wonderful family. Maybe your children will inherit his abilities too. I approve of your marriage now. Congratulations. They sure switched gears quickly. What's this all about? It's kind of awkward being apologized to like this. But their apologies kind of feel good. Maybe because they treated me so horribly. I then said, "It's okay, what's done is done, but please go apologize to that restaurant. You messed up their floor." "Of course, we've already arranged to compensate for that. Dave and I will get married as planned, but we've agreed not to involve you two anymore. That's all right, isn't it?"
What?
My words seemed unexpected to them. They both exclaimed in surprise. "Didn't Dave tell you? You two will be living separately now." "What? You and Dave are going to live separately? Of course." "No, we will live together. That's not what I mean." "Huh?" "I spoke with Dave and Greg. We decided that you and Charlotte will move out." "What?" "You didn't know? Dave was furious with you and Charlotte, and Greg, agreeing with him, said you'd both be kicked out of the house so you can reflect on your actions." "What did you say?" Apparently, they really hadn't heard. Greg had apologized repeatedly, blaming himself for spoiling them. He said he would force them to relearn by providing only the bare minimum for living expenses. "Avery will have nothing to do with you anymore," he had assured me of that. We didn't know that. So they really hadn't heard. "By the way, I saw a big luxury car down the road just now." "Oh, that's our car. The driver should be waiting inside." "It drove off after dropping off some luggage." "What?" Karen rushed out to the street in panic. There were 2 large duffel bags and a letter. Karen read the letter frantically and then collapsed.
"What's wrong, Mom? What did it say?"
Charlotte snatched the letter, and her eyes widened as she read.
"What? You will live at this address from now on? Where the heck is this?"
"It's 3 bus stops away."
"Bus? What?"
They couldn't believe what was happening. The letter instructed them to live at the given address. I looked it up on my phone. Oh, it was quite an old building, an old apartment, to put it mildly. "Oh, here are the keys to your new home, and some living expenses." "That's it? This won't even last half a day." To me, it seemed like a decent amount, enough to live for several months. They were screaming about it not lasting half a day, and Charlotte also collapsed. We couldn't let them sit there forever. In their dazed state, I called a cab, told the driver the destination, and sent them off. They were too stunned to resist. Just before the cab drove off, "You better reflect on your lives. If not, the evil spirits will cause more trouble. Wouldn't want your illness to linger or to remain boyfriendless, right?" Dad said. Their faces turned even paler, and they kept shaking their heads vigorously, like bobblehead dolls. Later, the 2 of them were apparently living in the old apartment, screaming and half crying. Despite begging Greg and Dave, they were turned away at the door. Apparently, they quickly ran out of the money they were given, still clinging to their old, lavish lifestyle. It's hard to suddenly adapt to a commoner's life. Will they ever truly change? Charlotte was young. She should just get a job and not look down on her commoner colleagues. As for me, I got married to Dave. I'm not fond of flashy weddings, so we just had a small garden reception with family and close friends. Even so, dressed in my wedding gown, my parents shed tears of joy, and Dave praised me, saying I looked beautiful. I was as content as could be. Married life has its ups and downs, but we're happily married and doing well. Dave and I share the same views on money, so I have no worries at all. And then we were blessed with a baby. When I went back home after giving birth, I suddenly remembered and asked Dad, "By the way, Dad?" "I didn't know you had a 6th sense. Hey, is there anything around me?" "I've had terrible shoulder pain lately. Don't they say spirits tend to cling to the left shoulder?" I was a bit worried. To my question, Dad just laughed. What are you talking about? I don't have powers like that. Your shoulder pain is probably just from nursing." "Huh? But what happened to those 2 was exactly as you said." "That was just a coincidence. It's normal for people to get sick or have boyfriend troubles. Well, the fraudster thing was a crazy coincidence, I admit." "Really? But at the restaurant you mentioned a woman with curly hair and one with dyed brown hair, and they seemed to know what you meant." Then, as if he couldn't hold it in anymore, Dad burst out laughing. There are so many women with curly and dyed brown hair, you know.
Oh, so that means...
It was clear those two were quite disliked. They probably had many women with burnt hair and dyed hair in their minds.
I was stunned to see Dad laughing so hard, and the baby in my arms was smiling like an angel, seemingly amused by Dad.
I'm telling you to get out.
In front of me, my husband glares at me with utter contempt. I instinctively touch my stomach gently. I've given birth to 3 daughters with my husband, but what he always wanted was a son. I still remember how after giving birth to my eldest and second daughters, he said the next time it had to be a boy. When our 3rd daughter was born, he even left the naming entirely to me. I felt like sighing at the thought of divorce. My husband mocks me.
Don't worry about a successor. There's already someone else who will bear me a son.
My name's Anne, a stay-at-home mom. I just turned 40 this year. I currently live with my husband Tom and our 3 daughters. It's been 3 years since I gave birth to our 3rd daughter. I decided to start working this month. It's because we can't afford to let our 2 older daughters continue their extracurricular activities on my husband's salary alone. I decided to work for the sake of our 3 children. Fortunately, I quickly found a job and now contribute to the household expenses. But lately, my husband has been nagging me about taking care of his elderly parents.
I'd appreciate it if you could quit your job to take care of my parents, Anne.
That's impossible right now.
Why? We can live well enough with luxuries on my salary, can't we?
I haven't indulged in luxury even once. I'm working because your income alone isn't enough to afford the girls' extracurricular activities.
They don't need to do any extracurriculars, right? It's fine not to learn anything.
This is how my husband always grumbles at me. So when he starts talking about this, I've learned to brush it off.
Are you listening, Anne?
I get it. I'll try to help out as much as I can. Honestly, I'm not fond of my in-laws. I don't really want to help with their care. But my husband and I live near his parents' home. We decided to start our married life in an apartment near his parents' house as he suggested when we got married. Back then, I didn't know their true nature and casually agreed. I'm sure that'd be convenient for both parties. But I soon came face to face with the reality. It was about 6 months after our wedding. Jane asked me to help tidy up so we could place a large table she bought for gatherings at their house. At my in-laws' house, I'm treated like a maid. Put this here, tidy that up, serve coffee. As a newlywed, I couldn't handle them well and followed their instructions. Because of this, every time I visited, they treated me worse. Every visit, I'm treated like a maid, forced to listen to their endless boasts and struggles from the past, and finally,
"Hurry up and give birth to a boy to be the successor,"
they'd say. My husband, who said he wanted children, would add,
"Of course, a boy would be better. If it's not a boy, there's no point in having a child."
Even when I was pregnant, all they cared about was the baby's gender. When they found out the first one was a girl, they insulted me, saying,
"One girl might be convenient to have around."
How heartless they were to me. When they found out that both the second and third were girls too, my in-laws blatantly lost interest in my daughters. They never paid any attention to them, only saying,
"Next time, give birth to a boy."
"Why is the house so untidy? There's no rambunctious boy playing around. Always busy, yet you can't even clean properly. Is it your laziness why you can't have a boy?
All these girls, and they'll just leave home when they get married. Instead of wasting time on them who won't be successors, you should be devoting yourself to us."
These are supposedly their own grandchildren, and how could they say such words? I never wanted to go to their house, yet I had to endure such treatment. I've talked to my husband about keeping distance from his parents many times, but he never understood.
The house being messy is a fact. Girls are supposed to read quietly and play, right? But look how they've scattered things. It's your job to do the housework and childcare.
It's absurd to say housework and childcare are solely a wife's job when both of us work and have to raise children.
If you use work as an excuse, then just quit and become a full-time housewife. If you can't, then my mom's right, isn't she?
Do you really think your salary alone can support me and our 3 daughters? That's why I'm working too. His reasoning gave me a headache. Sure, there was a time when husbands worked outside and wives stayed home to care for children, but those times have changed. It's normal for wives to work now. Refusing to accept this challenge while insisting that housework and childcare are still solely the wife's responsibility is ridiculous.
No matter how much I tried to convince him, my husband never changed. Mom's right. Dad's way is the correct one. Every time he said that, thoughts of divorce crossed my mind. But my daughters, oblivious to all this, are attached to their father. Only my eldest, a middle schooler, seems to have some reservations about her dad. Being in her teens, she doesn't interact much with him. But watching our youngest daughter innocently laugh and ask for a hug from her dad, I couldn't bring myself to divorce. 3 months passed since then. Suddenly, my husband started coming home late more often. I asked him when he returned one evening, "Tom, you've been coming home late recently. Is something happening at work?" "No, just today. A colleague made a mistake, so I had to stay late. Don't worry about it." Initially, I believed what my husband said, but as his late returns became frequent, I questioned him again. He started saying things like, "I was delayed by client entertainment," or "The meeting with the client ran long." While I started to suspect his behavior and actions, I couldn't gather the courage to confront him, not wanting to take their beloved father away from the children. I began to act as if his late returns didn't bother me. 6 months have passed. A colleague at work told me she saw my husband walking in the downtown area with a young woman. I told her that my husband was at work, so it couldn't be true, but she insisted she couldn't have mistaken him. She and I are close. Our children are of similar ages, and we often go camping or have barbecues together on weekends. She always gets along well with my husband whenever they meet, so I knew she couldn't have mistaken him. But even knowing this, I still wanted to believe in my husband. "Shouldn't I approach him next time I see him?" she suggested, making my heart skip a beat. I told her I'd talk to my husband directly, assuring her everything was fine. Hoping her sighting was a mistake, I went straight to a private investigator after work and requested an infidelity investigation. 5 days later, the investigator contacted me. "It was quite straightforward," he said. Meeting the investigator after work, I was handed substantial evidence. There were several photos of my husband entering a hotel with a woman. The evidence was clear. I decided to confront my husband about his affair as soon as I got home. He had returned before me and was just looking at his cell phone in the living room. Seeing my face, my eldest daughter took her sisters to her room. Though feeling sorry, I couldn't keep silent. "Tom, can you explain this? I've been hearing about overtime and client entertainment, but going into a hotel with a business partner, is that part of client entertainment too?" My husband began making a phone call, his face cold, without saying anything to me. He remained silent, not speaking to me. "So your silence means you admit it's true?" "It has nothing to do with you, Anne." "You really think a husband's affair has nothing to do with his wife?" "It doesn't concern you." No matter how many times I asked, my husband repeated that it had nothing to do with me. Then suddenly, the house's intercom rang. Thinking to ignore it during such a time, my husband quickly went to open the front door. In came my in-laws and the woman from the photos given by the detective. "What is going on? Did you call them?" "I wasn't planning on telling the truth until everyone was here." "Well, they're here now, so explain. What's with this photo?" I pushed the photo at my husband again. "This woman here is pregnant with a boy. Our family has a tradition of needing a male heir. I told you before we married that our family needed a son. Yet, Anne, you only gave birth to girls, and 3 of them. So you're no longer needed. Get out." As my husband finally started talking, he made no sense and handed me divorce papers. "Wait, what do you mean she's pregnant? How long have you been cheating?" I knew about the boy thing, but we can't control the baby's gender, right? And Tom, you loved our daughters too, didn't you? "Anne, you knew all about Tom's wishes, yet only gave birth to girls. Someone like that should just leave this out quietly." "Sorry, but I'm not talking to you right now, Jane. I'm talking to Tom. Tom, explain this to me." As I pressed my husband, my in-laws butted in. "Enough of that. Tom's finally going to have the son he's always wanted. You're useless, Anne, and you should just leave." "I'm not talking to you, Ben. I'm talking to Tom. Why are you two getting involved? Don't try to change the subject." My husband took a deep breath. "Isn't this enough? There's no need to talk it over. Just leave quietly." "What are you talking about? We have 3 daughters, and you know as well as I do that it's impossible for me to support them on my income alone." "That's none of my concern. You wanted girls, didn't you? Just get out." "Stop joking around. What do you mean, wanted? Tom, you love the girls too. Why are you saying this now?" I thought my husband would say something, but it was his mistress who retorted. "This is why middle-aged women are so troublesome. Just leave quietly when you're told to." "What are you talking about? You're the one who's made our family complicated."
Complicated? It's your fault for not being able to have a boy. The mistress smirked at me. I realized I had expected too much from my husband. We have 3 children and the youngest adores Tom. I wanted to believe that divorce wasn't the only right choice. I hoped that faced with the evidence, Tom would think of the children. That he would at least be a good father in front of them, even if we couldn't be a happy family. But in reality, he brazenly brought even his mistress. Fine, I'll divorce you. It's hopeless. I had been too naive. I stood up, feeling this deeply, and went to gather my things. The mistress watched with a smug smile, but I didn't care anymore. I snatched the divorce papers from my husband and signed them. I'll take all 3 girls. I'll demand compensation and child support later. I'll leave for now, but I'll come back later for the things I can't take today. Do whatever you want. My usually sarcastic in-laws listened with dissatisfied faces, leaving the matter to my husband. My husband knew this and insisted on telling me. Sensing a different atmosphere than usual, I hugged my eldest daughter, who had been watching from her room. Understanding immediately, she began to pack her things. The second and youngest daughters, thinking they were going out, happily prepared their bags, as they always did when leaving the house. Even as we left with just our essential belongings, no one came out of the living room. The second and youngest daughters looked puzzled, but with smiles and waves, they cheerfully left the house. I contacted my parents. Having hardly visited since marriage due to the distance, it was an abrupt call, but my mother immediately told me to come back. They'd come to pick us up, so we decided to stay at a hotel for the night. There, without telling my daughters about their father's affair. Dad and I are now on different paths, I explained. The 2 younger ones, big fans of an idol group that had recently split, had heard them saying something similar. So, we can't be together anymore, right? The eldest seemed to understand my words. Back in my parents' home, I was busy with various procedures, transferring names on documents and other administrative tasks. 2 months flew by and I successfully received compensation and child support from my husband and his mistress. I had demanded compensation for the affair from both and child support from my husband. Wanting to avoid seeing their faces, I arranged everything through a lawyer. It was expensive, but worth it for the stress relief. According to the lawyer who had met with my in-laws, they were silently frustrated when discussing compensation and child support. However, the scandal of their son impregnating someone out of wedlock was bad for public image. Desperate to prevent further complications, my husband and in-laws scrambled to gather the money. Apparently, they even covered the mistress's compensation. 3 months passed. While we couldn't live luxuriously, supported by my parents, we began a peaceful life as a family of 6. My daughters and I were gradually getting used to life without their father. Then on a day off, my husband suddenly called. Ignoring him initially, he kept calling repeatedly. Worried that the continuous ringing would bother my daughters at their lessons, I reluctantly answered.
Oh good, Anne. I'm glad you finally picked up.
What do you want all of a sudden?
Actually, the mistress gave birth recently.
And what do you expect me to say to that? About to coldly cut the call, my husband suddenly raised his voice.
It's a girl.
My husband said that his mistress had given birth to a girl, and it wasn't a mistake in the ultrasound. The doctor told him from the start that it was a girl. The mistress lied about the baby's gender to marry him. Apparently, Tom was thinking of divorcing her if the baby was not a boy, but it was her in-laws who stopped her. They didn't want to lose their only grandchild. It seems like she was thinking about having another child right away, but her daily life has gotten so rough that she can't think of anything like that. Since she just gave birth, she had no job and no income. So he called off the divorce. Well, if you're taking care of a baby who's just old enough to hold their head up, life is probably like that. It's hard to do household chores as perfectly as before childbirth when you're desperate about the baby. And there's no way you have the energy or time to care for in-laws. Yet even living with such a new wife, the husband told me he's thinking of divorce now. What are you going to do by telling me that? I said coldly to my husband.
Anne, please, can't we start over?
He asked. What? You think I'm going to get back together with you now? No way. I snapped back at my husband.
Don't say that. You have a thorny yet delicate beauty like a rose. I love that about you, Anne. Let's start over one more time.
My husband was trying to hold me back with poetic words. His words gave me chills.
Anne, are you listening? We've been together for a long time, right? Just because we've been apart for a bit doesn't mean your feelings have changed, right?
Maybe I would have been happy with my husband's words of love when we first married, but after discovering his affair and getting a divorce, such words now only bring cold feelings to me. I laughed bitterly.
You're laughing. Does that mean you forgive me?
My husband misunderstood and said happily. What? Are you that stupid?
That was a bitter laugh. I'm not smiling, and I haven't forgiven you. Why would you say that? Anne, please. Let's think about getting back together. Haven't we been doing well? You were happy, weren't you? We weren't doing well. That's why we fought so many times. I wasn't happy. That's why I divorced you. After all, you were the one who said you didn't need me. We could start over, right? I was the one who said we should break up, so I'm the one saying we should get back together. Let's do it. My husband started saying absurd things to reconcile with me. I was honestly sick of hearing about the past, but then I suddenly changed the topic. Oh yeah, about Emma. Why do you know Emma's name? She didn't introduce herself. My husband raised his voice in surprise when I mentioned the name of his current partner. Of course, I know. I heard from the detective and sent her the compensation documents. So, about her. What about Emma? I was just wondering who she's targeting next. She has a hobby of meddling with happy couples or married people and breaking them up. Now that I'm divorced from you, I was thinking who her next target would be. My husband said nothing. Maybe he was speechless, mouth agape. I explained to my husband about this woman, Emma. Emma has been very cute since she was young, always surrounded by various people. Her father was the president of a company, adored her, spoiled her, and bought her anything she wanted. Because she could get anything, stealing from others became her hobby. As she grew up, her targets for stealing became boyfriends, fiancés, husbands. Stealing was her hobby, so once she got them, she would easily dump them. When I introduced her social history as investigated by the detective, my husband's voice trembled. What the hell? Why are you telling me this now? If you told me when we were divorcing, I wouldn't have gone through this. At that time, all you said was get out. You didn't even listen to my side of the story, so I did what you told me to do. Besides, a woman who approaches a married man knowing he's married can't be a decent person, can she? Don't talk like that. It's unfair, Anne. You make it sound like I'm the bad guy. If you had explained properly at that time, things would have been different. My husband suddenly spoke in a dejected tone, playing the victim. His words angered me, and I lashed out at him. What are you saying after you've cheated on me? It's not that you're like the bad guy. You are the bad guy. Why don't you just live your life however you want? I don't care anymore. To my words, my husband suddenly spoke in a gentle voice. Anne, it's going to be tough raising 3 daughters on your own, right? I'll take at least one of them. Give me one of the 3. It'll be easier for you. 2 kids are enough, right? The content of his kind words was so disgusting it made my head spin. What does he think of our daughters? I would never send them to live with such a man. My husband and his parents don't truly want to live with my daughters because they love them. He speaks as if any of them would do, as if they're not even people. I can only see a future where they're crushed by my husband and his parents. As they grow up, I know they'll be treated terribly, just like I was. So I flatly refused. Stop joking around. I will raise my daughters properly. Don't be like that. Kids need their dad, right? My husband said, trying to justify himself. A father who barely took part in raising them and cheated doesn't deserve custody. I spoke firmly, not to give him any false hopes. It's up to the daughters whether they want such a dad. They're too young to decide for themselves, so I'll take responsibility and raise them. I said angrily and hung up the phone on my husband. I don't know if it was because I blocked him, but I never heard from him again. Months passed. My husband and Emma apparently got divorced. Emma took her child and went back to her parents' house. Apparently, the child's father was also married, and she's been sued for compensation by his real wife. Financially strained, she's now living with her parents raising her child. Terrifyingly, she seems to have no remorse. She's aware of her wrongdoings and shows sincerity in the form of compensation. But that money is provided by her father, a company president, so she lives a carefree life. It seems it was just a whim for her to go after my husband, who could get anything she wanted. She decided to target married men using her beauty and status to take whatever she wanted. She just happened to see my husband and me in town and decided to destroy our lives on a whim. It's a nice nuisance because my life was ruined just because of a whim. The reason Emma, who usually just took men and left, decided to marry my husband was because he was indecisive and sweet on her. Emma wanted to marry a man who would treat her like a princess, giving in to her every whim and buying her anything she wanted. Not only towards my husband, who was easily charmed by her, but also the mistress herself. I'm speechless with disbelief. My husband was deceived, but he could have refused and stayed faithful. No matter what I hear, the fact that my husband betrayed me doesn't change. I heard that my husband and his family were shunned by friends and relatives and moved far away. They came to my house just once after moving. Anne, stop being stubborn and give us one of the kids. That's right, Anne. If you raise them alone, the love will be unbalanced. It's not good. So, the 3 of us will raise them. Please stop, I'll raise them myself. Maybe they thought they could take the youngest. The three of them came with awful expressions, trying to take her away, but I resisted desperately. You can't handle it, Anne. You can't raise her while working. Hand her over. Anne, it's pitiful. We'll take care of her, don't worry. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. Stop! Don't take her away, that's kidnapping! My third daughter screamed loudly, and I shouted just as loudly. Residents nearby heard our cries and gathered, quickly restraining the three of them. Soon after, the police arrived in response to the call and took the three away. I thanked the neighbors repeatedly and was relieved about my daughter's safety. After that, the three of them received a restraining order, but I am considering moving because of this. Just having a restraining order isn't enough to feel safe. As long as they know where we are, it's not strange to think they might come again. I feel sorry for my parents living with us, so I discussed moving with them. They agreed, saying it would be a nuisance if we were followed forever, and decided to sell the house and move with us. Still, I feel sorry that my daughter's environment has to change so often. Yet, just seeing their smiling faces and healthy growth is healing. I decided to move to a new place to protect them. Shortly before moving, I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it was the moving company, I answered, but it was surprisingly Emma. Summarizing her sobbing story, she apparently got involved with too many men and contracted a serious disease. She cried, asking for the money back for her treatment, but I responded coldly. Don't you have a wonderful husband? Or somebody who buys you everything? I don't have anything to do for you. I cut her off without really listening to her response. I blocked her number right there and bought a new cell phone, ensuring I wouldn't receive any more calls from Emma. I planned to keep working hard, repaying my parents for their support, and ensuring my daughters grew up healthy and happy.